Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody from around the world. And thank you for joining us on this first symposium for 2025, the January HITLAB Symposium on Digital Health Evidence Diffusion. My name is Stan Kishnowski, and I am chairman of HITLAB, and will be hosting and helping you navigate the program today, walking you through an update on what happened at JP Morgan Healthcare, what's going on in the world of digital health when it comes to a lot of the funding freezes and unfreezes that we're seeing from the US federal government. We're going to be talking about the world of digital health and apps from Europe and from our chairman of the Breakthrough Alliance European Board, Laurent van den Berg. And then we're going to be jumping into having a review of JP Morgan and what people saw there. Laurent will be talking about that as well, as he was also at JP Morgan. And then we'll be getting into toward the end of the first hour today, talking about breaking barriers in women's health with the global BTA Breakthrough Alliance board member, chairman Bill Toronto, talking with a digital health leader from Mount Sinai School of Medicine. We'll be winding out the first hour with someone from Digital DX Ventures, Michelle Colucci, and hearing from her and her perspective there. So we've got a busy day today, and obviously there's a lot going on, not only in healthcare, but in digital healthcare. The second hour will have an interview with someone from the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. We'll be hearing from them about their philanthropic ventures and some of their updates from JP Morgan as well, what they're seeing for the not-for-profit community and how JP Morgan conference helped out there. And then we'll also be talking to Savan Devani from the company BioTrillion. And Savan's been working for a few years now in developing literally a digital doctor that can sit in everyone's pocket. He's also the recent winner of a Breakthrough Alliance champion competition. And then we'll be winding up with one of our favorite folks, Matthew Holt, who is the founder, author, and digital health thought leader for a few decades now out of Silicon Valley, and who leads the healthcare blog. Matt Holt is going to be talking to us about some of his perspectives from the JP Morgan conference, really festival, since only about 3,000 people go to the actual JP Morgan conference and about 100,000 go to the overall San Francisco environment during JP Morgan. And then in the last hour, we're going to be talking to some extraordinary leaders in digital health who are leading right now companies that are transforming healthcare and growing at an incredible rate month over month, year over year. First, we'll be talking to the head of the Proficient Lab from New York City, Unica Alexander, and we'll be talking to her about what she's seeing with AI and digital laboratories. And then we'll be talking to Grayson Robinson from Renova Health, who's reinventing how people can actually modify and renovate their homes after or even before any kind of a life crisis, so they can age in place in their homes forever. And then we'll be talking to Tim Liu, who's from Silicon Valley Bank, and hearing about his world and what he's seeing from JP Morgan and some of the healthcare investment trends that he's seeing and exits that he's hearing about as well. And we'll wind up with Buzz Stewart from Medcurio, again, a revenue positive digital health company that's transforming healthcare for all the good by creating health exchanges within large enterprises and really leading the way for AI and automation in healthcare data for large healthcare institutions. So that's the agenda over the next 3 hours. We are going to be very busy. We also are one of the few environments where our community chat is open. So please do pop in your LinkedIn, introduce yourself to the community on the chat within Zoom here. And if you're not already, please do remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, our LinkedIn page, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Get involved in our social media groups. They're all very active, and we want to help create a better connected ecosystem, because what we find is that a better connected ecosystem leads to a more efficient ecosystem, more transparency, and much better decision-making when it comes to finding and evaluating and engaging and then contracting and implementing digital health technologies to help improve patient care and help improve medicine development for patients. And with that, we're going to jump into our first panel. It's going to be led by, again, like I mentioned earlier, the Breakthrough Alliance Europe chairman, Laurent van den Berg, and he's going to be talking with an extraordinary duo who are helping lead the way for digital health transformation in Europe from the company Malo. And I'll hand it over to you, Laurent. It's all yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Stan. Wow, quite an agenda. Really excited to start the year here with this session. Actually, for everyone, you really need to see this. I mean, that's why we start. I mean, we put Florian and Madhu in this first session. You need to see this, Malo, the super family app. They are building it, but you'll see where they are actually already with some big impact. It's one of the few actually that managed to follow, detect, and act actually on the health. They have actually 200,000 families connected in France, about 25% of all births in France. So it's a pretty huge coverage. They also have some very clear clinical data on the impact they can have on the vaccination and postpartum depression. And they will continue with actually the different disease and health topics that you have to manage when you have children, and of course when they grow from 0 to 8. And why we present them to you, obviously a great achievement, but they are now getting on their international expansion. So it's really the right time for you to see that, and you will see a big momentum getting to probably UK and US this year very soon. So I'm passing the word to Flora and Madhu. And the last thing that is great in there is that you'll see this duo. I think that's really what makes the company run. As you know, you need to be two legs to really run fast. So you will see that it's a fantastic duo that I'm very glad to be working with. So on this, give you the word, Florian, Madhu. Thanks.
Yep. So hello, and thanks Laurent and HITLAB for having us. You're starting your day. It's 5 p.m. here in Paris, and I'm proud to speak here. So I'm Flo Le Goff. I'm a medtech entrepreneur. In 2009, and I launched the first online EHR for family physician in Europe. It is now used by 1/3 of physicians. And after that, I built the first patient-reported outcomes platform in oncology in Europe, and we demonstrated an overall survival improvement in 2015. And now I'm here to speak about a different topic. At the JP Morgan conference, AI, biotech, and M&A topics took the center stage. And we learned that 2025 was going to be a crucial year. But one topic missed, I think, from the conference, it was family health. Why? Because in family health, small change can drive massive impact. It will improve health span. It will lower cost of care. It will bring better life for toddlers, and better life for toddlers means better life for parents as well. So this is why I'm here with Madhu, to change the conversation and to make evidence-based digital family health a priority. So Madhu, I will let you introduce yourself.
Everyone, very quickly, I'm Madhu Desbois. I have a medical background, but I wanted to create a more significant impact in healthcare. So in 2015, I launched my first company in telehealth platform that served 20 million users in France, recruiting 300 doctors, and became profitable in just 4 years. 4 years before being acquired by a major player in French healthcare industry. And today, as a CEO and partner, I drive innovation in digital health, developing data-driven solutions into Malo app that empower parents, support healthcare professionals to detect at early stage pathologies, and help pharma shape the future of preventive medicine.
So what is Malo? What is this thing that we're speaking of? So Malo is an app designed for parents who want to be confident with the health of their children. Malo gives them step-by-step, asking just a few targeted questions to create a fully personalized 100% algorithm health journey. Parents love its intuitive visual approach, which provides clear insight into their child health and concrete action that they can take immediately. We already follow 200,000 families in Malo on the French market. And we do have some clinical results already. So 92% of families who use Malo follow our health recommendation. But Malo goes further. It intelligently tracks children's health over time. We detect early signs of potential issue. you maybe already are aware of the potential of early disease screening, especially for neural development issue. And this is one of the topics that we are leader on. And we provide clear medical recommendation, but we do not replace doctors. What we do is that we generate a medical report that parents can share with healthcare professionals, and we ensure that people stay in a continuous loop and stay informed between appointments and consultation. So Malo is a product that tracks, analyzes, and helps people act on their health data with a big focus on family health. It's a powerful app with lots of clinical evidence already that brings peace of mind to French families and soon to the US market. And this is something that we are announcing today. We are planning to open the US market by the end of the year. Over the past year, we expanded Malo reach beyond children by also checking parent health. And this is where the big picture of family health gets clearer. This allows us to monitor the entire family well-being. We help parents actively and proactively maintain everyone else. Malo is already effective in detecting neurodevelopment disorder and postpartum depression. We did publish 2 papers in 2022 and 2024, and we will be happy to share the link on the chat later. And we are adding 2 new health verticals each year. So in 2025, we plan to focus on children mental health, on early detection of cancer signals on parents. Because one of the issues of being a parent, as you may be aware of, is that between 25 of age and 45, you do not have a lot of great option to take care of your own health because everyone is speaking of your children. So with Malo, we're kind of thinking differently, and we're taking care of both parents and children. What we're doing at Malo is that so we prove that we were working on our model was working on postpartum depression and toddler vaccination. We've shown that people using Malo were able to take better care of their children and to take better care of themselves. There is some results that we're going to share, and a few insights on what we are going to do is that, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to add a few health verticals each year, and our goal is quite simple. Right now, 25% of French families are using Malo. We are going to get to be close to 50% in a few months, and we're launching the US in a few months as well, and we're on track to target 1 million families in 2026. And this is some very, very interesting result because what we're currently doing on the healthcare system, our impact is quite simple because we're able to track so many health verticals, and because people are engaged into Malo because they just want to have, the best picture and the best understanding of their child health. They are really, really active, and we have some impressive cohort of usage in Malo. And what we are already doing is that we enable new treatment option, for instance, for postpartum depression, and we are able to, screen earlier and let people access new treatment option. And this is a game changer because there's so many topics in family health where you just need help. And you just need to be screened.
Florian, on this one, it's important for people to understand. It's not magic happening from the sky, but with the app from Malo, you answer a number of questions. From these ones, there is identification of a problem linked to depression, and that can identify that the mother, I would say, has this problem, and then it gets directed to a doctor. And as you know, there are treatments for postpartum depression. So it allows to, instead of having a treatment errands of the mother for some time before you get there, you actually get much faster into the treatment. And remember, 20% of the mother actually are getting into postpartum depression. So it's a huge impact and concrete action.
Yeah, exactly. Happy to answer a few questions. I know that the agenda for the day is quite intensive, so yeah.
Maybe Florian, if you can talk about what's next in terms of going to US and maybe fundraising.
Yeah, so just a quick word on the company. We're a seed stage company where we will start raising our Series A in a few weeks. And the US expansion is scheduled for the last quarter of 25. So in a few months, we are actively working on it. And we are also working on the Spanish market as well, Spanish speaking market as well. So everything is
So we're raising
currently on
6
track.
million for this series.
Can you talk a little bit about vaccines and the impact you get there? Also, I think it's a pretty nice one. And I take these two because it gives people an example of what you will continue to do on the other disease one by one. So maybe summarize what you have been able to achieve and publish in Nature recently.
Yeah, it might seem quite simple, but vaccination is actually a very complex issue because you need to get people on board, especially parents, and it's sometimes very, very hard to reach parents and build confidence into the product. So what Malo does is that we just target people by the age of their child and their healthcare needs, and we bring them the correct information at the right time to allow them to build their own confidence into products, which means that when people go and see their healthcare provider, they already received 2, 3, 4 times the information that vaccination was an option and how it was working and why it's going to build, it's going to have a benefit for their own children. So it brings.
And then there is another question. Sorry to interrupt you, Florian, but I think there is a question, and I think it's very important you answer. Of course, people can see this app as being just for the parent, and so you triage and so on. But what is interesting is that these service and solution, or you should even say products, see as different clients. Pharma on one side, hospital and doctor on the other, and then the parents. So maybe explain a little bit how actually each one of them can buy and actually will be a source of revenue for you.
Yeah, so there is different topics because there is a topic of the ecosystem. So you have to work with everyone. Where when you're doing healthcare, you cannot just work with patients. You have to work with patient, provider, payers, and everything. Everyone here knows that. And what we have been doing with Malo is that we have been working with the French state, private payers, and pharmaceutical companies, and everyone would just have an interest into having active, proactive parents in regard to their own child health, are contributing to the Malo model as funders, but also as a relay in order to reach more parents. This is how we're reaching 25% of new parents because everyone is working hands in hands.
Okay. No, that's great. And look, I advise everybody to obviously reach out to Florian and Madhu. Watch actually the English version of the app to come to the App Store. Actually, Malo is one of the top downloaded health app worldwide from Apple. So they are monitored directly there in the US, like every big app. So watch this coming soon to the US. And of course, a lot more development and impact. So very glad to start the year. You will see. We'll give you some news as it's developed. And on that, Stan, back to you.
Thank you, Laurent. And again, thank you for a great presentation from the Malo team and
Thank
all
you.
the good work that they're doing to really bring us together in terms of the best digital solutions that are seeing the best diffusion across continents and from around the world. Thank you all. Very good. And as we are talking to a startup from France and our chairman of the Breakthrough Alliance in France, don't forget to look into attending the Breakthrough Alliance Europe conference in Paris on April 1st and April 2nd. It's a 2-day meeting that will be highlighting the most advanced digital health companies with the most evidence of adoption. And again, that's April 1st and 2nd, coming up in a few months. And again, you can contact me at LinkedIn if you're interested in attending, or again, go to the registration page to apply to attend. Again, on the hitlab.org website, you'll see it there. And next up, we have, as you can see from our amazing agenda, our own Jerry Antamata, who heads up our community development at the lab, who will be talking with Jolene Anderson from Vector Point Ventures about some of what she saw at JP Morgan this year and some of the trends that she's seeing in investing. Jerry, handing it back over to you.
Yeah, cheers, Stan. Great to be back for 2025 and have a really good opening hearing from Laurent and the European startup, which I think was super relevant since JP Morgan, I think this year had a really great number of international technologies and innovations actually attend, and of course really heavily highlighting a lot of the investors who are looking to put capital into a lot of digital health and health innovation startups this year. And it's my pleasure to be speaking with Angela and Jolene today, who I think some of the audience may be familiar with their work in the investing space, and they're going to talk about some of the highlights that they took away from the JP Morgan Health Week a couple of weeks ago, and share their insights, especially with some of the investors who may be on the program watching today. But Angela and Jolene, welcome to the program. For those that aren't familiar with you, if you guys would like to give a quick 30-60-second intro about the work that you're currently doing and where you're based. Angela, we'll start with you.
Hello, everybody. I'm based in California, where it is warmer than on the East Coast. I'm happy to report. Northern California, not Southern California. Kidron Capital invests in women's health, very broadly defined. So not only reproductive health, but areas where women and men are different. And I'm a physician by training and am delighted to be here. Thank you.
No, wonderful to have you on. Jolene?
Yes, also delighted to join our esteemed panelists and share a little bit about what we do. I'm the managing director of Vector Point Ventures. We are raising an impact fund. I've been a life science investor and a former chapter president for Keiretsu Forum, and really focused on digital health, diagnostics, things that will improve the healthcare outcome, especially for women.
That's wonderful. Thanks both for coming on the program. And we are popping both Angela and Jolene's LinkedIns in the chat, so please do connect with them, whether you're a startup or whether you're a fellow investor and would like to connect with them. I'm sure they'll be very happy to connect with you after the program. But for the both of you, we'd definitely love to hear about some of the key trends and themes that are highlighted at this year's conference, and also your take on how current investors should sort of position themselves in sort of responses to things that were going on 2 weeks ago. Anya, do you want to kick us off with that?
Sure. I was actually thrilled this year, unlike any other year, and I have been going to JPM since 1992. Which is a very long time. It wasn't called JPM then; it was called H&Q. But that aside, it has been it started out as being totally male, suits and very formal. The suits are still there. There are still predominantly men, but was absolutely different this year, from all years past, was the focus on women's health and on women. And a huge part of it is digital health. After all, the unicorns in women's health are digital health companies. So digital health is leading the pack in terms of women's health, and the other areas are catching up. But what was really totally exhilarating, as Stan said, the JP Morgan Core Conference is only a small part of it now. It's so totally flipped. All the activity, in my view, that's really novel and interesting, and breaking borders and grounds and breaking all kinds of rules happen in the associated events. And there were over 20 women's health focused events. And to boot, at the core conference, JP Morgan had 4 events at the co-conference on women's health. And one of them focused on a very crucial area for us investors, which is how to channel more money into women's health so it can flourish. So, and then in addition, women in bio had a photo shoot of all the women in pink in Union Square. So it was, I would say, a bonanza year. 2025 has promised to be a bonanza year for women's health, with digital health leading the pack. And I would also add that a similar thing is happening in Davos. And there's been a lot going on in Davos, and I can talk a little bit more about some of the reports that have come. Jolene.
Yes, it's very exciting to see some familiar female faces at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. And those of us who've been watching women's health and investment over the last several years are very excited to see the trajectory going the other way, and particularly having Dr. Jill Biden, whom I'm a huge fan of, speak as a keynote. However, I think there are other keynote trends that will impact women's health, and that's the personalized approach and the health tech. And also, as a woman who suffered from chronic fatigue syndrome and was sidelined at the age of 38 from a very successful career, I can tell you the focus on immunology and how inflammation is hugely important. There are all kinds of devices that will enable physicians to make better diagnoses and say, instead of telling women that it's all in their head. So that's really an important part. But we also noticed there was a focus at JP Morgan on M&A. There were fewer deals done at the JP Morgan conference this year. I thought it was very, very interesting to see that companies are looking at more seriously at acquiring companies out of China, because the data is becoming much more sophisticated. And I think that's really a compelling story. Based in Seattle, we've seen a lot of Chinese companies, a lot of Pacific Rim trade, but we will see how that pans out given the current focus of the administration. But also the AI debate. There's certainly no one questions the fact that AI is here to stay, but exactly what that will produce. I thought the information about AI and blending human intelligence with AI is extremely important. I was on a call earlier this morning with a physician who has a brain cancer research company, and they basically said, they are having a very difficult time getting AI reliable data in that sector. So it's just a tool. It's not the end all to be all, but it's here to stay.
No, that's good.
Tagging off the AI conversation, if I may, Jerry. I think we would all be remiss not to talk about AI. It dominated the conversation, even on the GLP-1 was not as popular as AI. And AI, I think, is going to be very important for women's health in many different ways, because one of the refrains was that, it's too expensive to analyze the data by sex and gender, or we don't have data, or it's bad data. And I think the ideas now being developed on synthetic data, digital twins, and also other really amplified analytic capabilities are going to be very important. So there were 4 reports released around JP Morgan and at JP Morgan on women's health, and I'll just mention them. McKinsey released a blueprint to close the women's health gap. BCG talked about 90 billion and counting, the business case for women's health. Lux Capital had released an article saying artificial intelligence for women's health. I think it's a good read. And then there was the WHAM report, the business case for accelerating women's health. And I think from the investor point of view, The women's health has now a foothold, not just a toehold. However, the flows of financing are still constrained. Very good news about ARPA, which was at ARPA-H, was present at JP Morgan. This is a newly founded government agency who's been focusing on women's health and other areas. And so they presented several times in concert with Jill Biden, as Jolene mentioned. So I think for investors, there are sort of new areas to focus on. And one last thing I want to say in the vein of women's health, the earlier speakers talked about women's health in the context of or pediatric health, which I consider women's health, as in the primary care physician. And this is very important because the GLP-1s has refocused pharma on common chronic diseases, large markets. And I think this is something very important for women's health, because much of women's health is common chronic diseases, just as Jolene talked about. And this is going to be the way forward.
No, that's fantastic. And I think some of the folks in the chat were wondering if you could share some links to some of those reports that you were.
Yeah, I'll put them in the chat.
That'd be really wonderful if you could. But I know we don't have too much time to chat, and you guys have shared some really, really great insights so far. But I know there was a lot of talk around sort of current market conditions at the conference, and you might have shared some things you guys learned about AI and women's health and stuff. But which sectors or asset classes, do you see as sort of the most promising for long-term growth, in your opinion? Jolene, we'll start with you.
Well, certainly health tech and diagnostics, things that will empower physicians to make better diagnoses and move patient care in the right direction. I'm sure Anula will really share her views on this, given her background as a physician. But also oncology, and oncology is here to stay. One of the largest VCs we have here in the Seattle area is really pivoted to therapeutics. We all know that we need to accelerate investment in certain types of cancer, particularly pediatric cancer and brain cancer, colon cancer. It's my expressed opinion that will see extreme investment this year. We know a lot of drugs are coming off patent, and the large drug companies will be looking at investing in earlier stage companies, which bodes well for therapeutics. And those are two of the things. Obesity was mentioned. That's a huge bucket. That's $150 billion, they say, or it's stated by the end of the decade, and still growing.
I don't have much to add to that. Just to reinforce what Jolene said, a lot of us who are physicians have been talking about the need for digital health and diagnostics, both, which I think are undervalued. And I think pharma has been over-indexed. So great that HITLAB is doing an excellent job of trying to reset that balance. And I think it bodes very well for patients in general.
No, absolutely. Anula, Jolene, thanks so much for sharing your insights. I'm sorry we couldn't get you to share even further insights, but we are unfortunately having to move on to the next panel. But everyone in the chat, please do connect with Jolene and Anula on LinkedIn, and do continue the conversation. And no doubt we'll most likely see you both back on the program for some time in the future for 2025. But I really appreciate both of your times. I know you're so busy. So we really appreciate having you on the program.
Thank you so much.
And Stan, back to you.
That's wonderful, Jerry. Thank you for leading that session. Just incredible insights, and really appreciated the history as well. Very few people have actually attended, which was a H&Q and now JPM. For a few decades now, so it's always wonderful to hear some of that perspective. We have an amazing value here. If you all want to jump in, get ready to enter the code, and the first one that does wins a 1-year breakthrough general fellowship at HITLAB. It's about $99 per year. It gets you into all sorts of exclusive virtual meetings and whatnot, all kinds of access to the HITLAB hub, which is one of the center points of digital health evidence diffusion and Enterpoint. So if you enter this code into the website link in the chat that Sammy just dropped in there, and you are up for the giveaway. So enter January into the link that you just saw there. No, you don't enter into the chat. You enter into the actual link. You have to click on the link in the chat and then enter the code January to be entered into the competition. And looking forward to seeing you all enter, and hopefully looking forward to working with some of you on the Breakthrough Alliance and being a HITLAB General Fellow. So that's going well. And next up, we're really excited to welcome back the chairman of the Breakthrough Alliance Global Network, Bill Toronto, who is also the president of the Merck Global Health Innovation Fund, which is the largest and also an evergreen fund, who you all should know about, and is responsible for the 22.5 exit multiple of Livongo, helped get that going and get that out to the door to Teladoc back in 2021 at an $18.2 billion exit, the largest exit in digital health history, and Preventus, which was $1 billion+ exit as well, and several others. And so Bill Toronto is going to be interviewing Dr. Mary Catherine George, who can give her background. She's one of the Women's Health Tech Challenge winners and just an extraordinary innovator in the New York City ecosystem. Very happy to welcome you both. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks, Stan. I appreciate it very much. Welcome, Dr. George, and hello, my fellow HITLAB and Breakthrough Alliance folks on the phone. Always a pleasure to talk to you today. Sorry about my screen, but as long as you can hear me, that's good. So, Dr. George, I always like to start off with at least the first question around your journey, and so the audience gets to know you. How'd you get yourself to be the director of clinical research program at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai?
Well, I have a very unusual story because I'm originally an opera singer. I'm an award-winning opera singer who came to New York to sing with City Opera, and I unfortunately found myself without a job. And someone recommended that I speak with the director of the research at St. Vincent's Hospital, which unfortunately no longer exists. And he showed me a drawer of papers, and it didn't look too scary, and I said okay, and I literally jumped into what was the HIV epidemic and the research that was being done, and literally cut my teeth on about 60 clinical trials, learning right and left. And I have to tell you, there were some tears amongst all of that, but truly it uncovered in me, I think, a real passion for research, which I didn't really know I had, because I guess I'm inherently curious about human beings. And so from there, I transitioned to Mount Sinai as a research coordinator, and worked with the two wonderful physicians, Dr. David Simpson, a highly regarded neurologist in pain, and Dr. Jessica Robinson-Papp. And I learned so much about chronic pain and became fascinated about pain, and decided, well, because I was helping them with designing research and enrolling subjects, and I thought, well, I want to do this. So I went back to school and got my PhD in health psychology. And I've become a sort of a clinical trial specialist in parallel with my fascination with research. And so my expertise was elevated with the Department of Neurology to become the director of clinical research. So I help a lot of innovators, not only myself here at the Department of Neurology, to take things to the next level when we're thinking of creative things. And so, I totally feel so blessed in some ways that I kind of fell into this pathway, because I've learned so much about the FDA and regulatories. But one in coupled with that, I always bring the perspective of the patient and an advocate for patients and those who can participate in research. So that's really become a real passion of mine, especially when it comes to chronic pain, which is so complex, both for women and men. And I think that's what got me very fascinated, is that you can see one person who's clinically the same as the next, yet their pain is so different. It's fascinating.
Well, thank you. And again, I apologize for my video glitch today, but I don't know if everybody caught it, but I think you said you came here to be an opera singer. So I think you're our first opera singer who is now a doctor, or a doctor who is an opera singer. So that is actually truly fascinating, but great journey. Because part of what we do at HITLAB and Breakthrough Lines is talking about women and women's health, I want to focus on that a little bit and what you do from a clinical research perspective. So my next question is, what are some of the unique challenges women investigators face in the digital health space, particularly in leadership or high impact roles? And maybe how can some of these barriers be addressed?
Well, part of the problem is that time is of the essence. Even in my role as both an investigator and the director of clinical research, I have to somehow straddle what are the responsibilities for what my position is, plus also my research endeavors. And sometimes if those are not covered by funding, you're often squeezing a lot of what you'd like to do in with your time, and that's a challenge, because we've learned that in a recent study last year that 37% of women who have MD PhDs are becoming successful researchers with NIH funding of an R01, and that really protects your time. You now are able to provide the funding that gives you the time to focus on your research agenda. And we've also seen that in 10 major medical specialty societies that fewer than 15% of department chairs and in the societies had leadership roles that were women. And so that's really, we need women in these roles so that they can become mentors. I was very fortunate to have Dr. Jessica Robinson Papp, because she really is a person who has helped me as a mentor and is really positioned now as the vice chair here to be a mentor for future women in research in our department. And I know Mount Sinai is taking this role of women in health very seriously and focused on I think one big publication last November about women in science and health. And also for the first time, we had a digital women's competition where we could submit our proposals to get funding, because that's really what it takes for us women to be investigators. We have to receive funding. I think for me, what's challenging, I'm working on a virtual reality self-hypnosis tool that uses software, and I think many people see me as women, and I have this very unusual background, and basically they're like, really? How are we going to fund that? Does that really have any legs? I think that's where I have most of the challenge. So I think between time and if you are a woman, sometimes you have a unique background that sometimes when people are looking at you to provide funding, they're not quite certain that you can get the job done, either because of time elements or because of maybe you have this unusual background that seems like, what are you doing in science? So I think it's how do we find ways to give women financial support so they can? And that's where I think it's the challenge is how can we provide funding for new investigators? How can we surround them with support and mentorship? And I know we're taking a very, very hands-on approach with me. If I hear of a woman who's wanting any research help, I'm on board right away, and helping them regulatories, navigating this process, because if you're going to be a scientist researcher, you really have to cut your teeth on the process, which is quite challenging.
Great, thank you. And so we just focused on sort of the investigator piece. Now let's go down one level to let's get into the actual trial design, and that's where my question is going to be next. How do you see gender bias impacting the design, execution, and interpretation of research in digital health, and what kind of steps can be taken to ensure women's health is accurately represented? beyond the
Well,
investigator piece?
you know, I totally am such an advocate of providing funding for participants in a major way. When we're working to include women as research participants, we need to think of their roles and how complex their lives are. Often these women are caring for either parents or children, or they're working and caring for multiple family members, and it can be quite difficult for them to set aside the time to be part of a research project, even if they really could benefit from being included in some of the research that we're doing. So it's advocating at that very beginning is to set aside sufficient budgeting so that we can give them caregiver support, we can give them transportation support, that we can design studies that have more decentralized visits. We can do things that will incorporate only the times that they need to come into the hospital or to the clinical research site when they need to for testing, but we can do other elements out at offsite with an e-platform of some type. Decentralized trials are going to be something that really helps include more women in our study designs, and really focusing on how can we advocate at early stages the complexity of a woman's life and make sure that we're supporting those individuals. You know, a lot of the research that I do is qualitative. So I hear the stories of the complexity of some of the women's challenges. And so if you're doing research in some of the depression or mood disorders or preeclampsia or endometrial pain, you really need to understand how can I provide funding to support the women so that they can find a way to participate and it's not such a high bar to jump through.
So I want to take it down another level. We talked about the participants, but I want to talk about a little bit about like what strategies have been successful in increasing female participation in clinical trials or digital health studies, and how do we encourage more women to both enroll and lead in those areas?
You know, I think what really was fascinating when I saw Stanford did a study looking at time banking, because a lot of times there are uncompensated roles that clinicians will be part of, and that they are able to bank that time in exchange for protected time. So we need to start doing things that are innovative for women so that they can be included in as a researcher. That is really the key essence, is time and compensation, because so much of our participants rely on that availability of that clinician. So if we've designed a study, if that clinician can't be available but 3 to 5 minutes, we're not going to get the quality of research that we need. So it's about how can we provide funding for those clinicians to be investigators like myself. So this Stanford study did a very unique thing where they provided time banking. If you did uncompensated work, you were able to get time back to you. So we need to do that, along with how can we get more women to show up to all kinds of networking where we can take, I know for me, take my Comfort Wave VR. I became much more interested in how I can bring that to the forefront for women who suffer with post-mastectomy pain syndrome, because I was at a networking event. I learned a process of how I can potentially move my idea forward because of a networking event that was with other digital health partners, other people who are doing research in the field. And it has just become a wonderful way of understanding how I can network, find mentors, find people who can help me bring my ideas to the forefront. So I think it's going to be a way of trying to find ways that are innovative beyond what it is that we've typically done for women.
Okay, we have time for one last question because I see Stan has popped up, but we do have just about 3 minutes left. I just want to talk about career development. People look at your career. How can the digital health ecosystem better support early career women researchers and investigators to help them thrive in the field if they want to have a career like yours?
Well, I think, it's very difficult if you are wanting to do research. And I think we need to have more opportunities of symposiums or face-to-face networking where we can get together and discuss. If you are an MD, PhD, or let's say you're just a PhD like me, get together with other people who have gone through the path as the way of being curious about something for your patient population. You know, so often that's what I've seen. I've seen someone who's curious about, can I make this simpler for patients? Can I make this more accessible? Can we use a digital device? Can I give something to people? And if I have a germ of an idea, how can I go and talk to some people who can help me formulate a process of doing the research, of getting the funding, of what are the regulations, because it is multi-layered. And then also too, as we know, about it's a challenge of time. It's going to take us some time to bring our idea to the forefront. But if you're persistent, which when everyone talks to me, they say, what is research? I said, it's a 24/7 deal. I love it. You have to have a passion for what you want to do in the digital health field. And I think if you bring these passionate people together, as with accelerators or with the new startup ventures or with any type of collaborative group where you can get those germ of ideas off the ground, it's going to be a phenomenal encouragement for someone like myself.
Well, thank you, Dr. George, for your time today. I really appreciate it. It was great to talk to you. I'm sorry I couldn't be on video today for some reason, but Stan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Outstanding. And thank you, Bill, for such a great interview with such a phenomenal leader. And we are cooking. We are nearing the top of the first hour. And we are going to be hearing from Michelle Colucci next, who is a managing partner and an active investor with Digital DX Ventures. And looking forward to hearing Michelle's perspective on JPM. She's a veteran here and understands what's going on in the ecosystem. And Michelle, thank you for joining us today. And I'm just going to hand the virtual stage over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here today. And on a high level, as I've been to JP Morgan many years, and on a high level, this was the first year I actually felt very encouraged. I feel like the last whole group of years was focused on, I'm going to focus on my core business. I'm going to divest everything else that's not related to it. I'm going to build, value based on what we know, what we've done, et cetera. And that actually has boded well for a lot of those companies. They have enhanced their balance sheets and stabilized their businesses, which were, was a great amount of instability given what transpired certainly through COVID and the uncertainty of that aftermath. So I think that we are seeing now companies that have really stabilized their businesses and are looking at growth, which is incredibly encouraging. You saw a lot of talk about pharma, right? I mean, you always do. But what I did notice, I was in a room with a panel that had FDA and CMS and Tempus and a couple, groups, and it was on diagnostics. And usually those rooms would have been, like maybe a third full. It was overflowing. So I was excited because, of course, given that we invest in AI and data-enabled diagnostics, for me, that was a first, seeing that level of enthusiasm in that small room. And really talking through what some of the challenges have been and pushing on what some of the opportunities could be with an adjustment in regulation, which was a lot of the discussion. So I was encouraged by that, and I was encouraged by the fact that there's a lot more conversation around digital health in general. There's a lot more sort of understanding about how important it is for patients to have their data. But alongside that comes with knowledge, right? Comes increasing demands by consumers to be informed and because they are informed, right? Now they know what's going on. It's like in the past, you went to a doctor or a lawyer and you did not really know, anything about what was behind in the magic box, right? The individual would tell you and you believed everything. Well, now with technology and internet and generative AI and so forth, as well as the ability to have access to your personalized data, consumers are so much more empowered, and they know what to ask, and that has forced the providers to be more informed. And that's where I think a lot of these technologies now, before there was a hesitancy, I don't want to do anything with a black box, it's AI, I don't know how they're thinking about it. Now it's like, wow, if you can show me that it's doing a better job, I'll adopt it. So I'm seeing more adoption of that as a result of the requirements that patients are leveling on their providers, and liability, right? I mean, I used to, when I started this fund years ago, I used to say doctors used to not have enough information. Now they have too much, right? And they don't know what to do with it. Well, the reality is that also creates legal consequences. So it's really important to make sure that they do embrace that, and they have been embracing it. And I see that as a big shift. And I see a lot of shifts in outcomes-based platforms and end-to-end platforms for different disease types. And, you do have the challenge that of some of the digital health companies that lost a lot of value of their stock, and so that has been something that people have had to address. But by and large, I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm for diagnostics. I'm seeing a lot of large companies have now a dedicated section, dedicated unit for diagnostics, and those diagnostic units are projected to do well. So the digital health piece, I think, is growing now, finally, after hitting a bunch of years of a lot of challenge. But the ones that will survive will be the ones that really are able to turn some of those, like the Teladocs and so forth, into profitable enterprises. They have to look for long-term, revenue, consistent revenue, and really create the business models that work to sustain their presence long-term. So, as I said, in general, we saw a lot about pharma. We saw a lot about Chinese innovation being brought here. We saw a lot of the digital health challenges with Amwell and Teladoc, but yet the opportunities for those end-to-end solutions being driven by the consumer health empowerment world. And we saw some, just recent acquisitions. A lot of them were big pharma acquisitions, but we have seen recently some exciting diagnostic acquisitions just this year. So I'm very optimistic about this year, to be honest, for the first time, I think, in many years, since I think before JP Morgan went online. And I'm happy to answer questions about that. What about digital health decision support software, social connection? Yeah. So that has become important because hospitals are actually embracing some of those softwares because since the patients come in and then they leave and then there's no connection, right, to their care, and the monitoring piece is really important. So I think that people are a lot more now aware, obviously, of mental health, and so the platforms that are serving to connect with patients continue to provide insights, information, value, connectivity to the healthcare system without the healthcare systems who are overloaded having to do it themselves. I think are seeing some very positive, support. I am seeing, as I said, a lot more investment in the space. The startup, health startup competitions were extremely well attended. And the companies that I'm speaking to were saying that they are having multiple great meetings and with investors, and a lot more investment funds are coming into these small companies. Still, I just did a panel a couple days ago in Germany on this. We're still seeing a lot of the angel groups and angel investors and family offices pick up a lot of the slack because venture has been very timid about coming back into the market, and that's been the case now for a while. And so we've had these companies that have had this valley of death, which has been horrible, that they've had to rely on their existing investors to get them through. I continue to have conversations for companies having those challenges, but it has made the companies stronger and leaner and focused more on revenue. And people are really still focused now in terms of investment on how soon are you going to have revenue, or do you have revenue, or how fast is that going to scale? So that continues to be a focus of investors right now. And the large investors are still being very careful. I think you're seeing some large investment going in like late stage with, large dollars, but the early stage startup world is still struggling a bit. But I do see that being filled by a lot of really great investors and some early stage and a lot of new funds that have come out that are making their name. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I don't see any other questions right now, but I do certainly would love to. I know a lot of our community is digital health startups, so maybe you can tell them a little bit about your thesis and what companies you're looking to invest in, and what kind of stage you're looking for. So maybe because you guys have done
Sure.
a lot, whether it's now diagnostics or Oxcan or Biosha, you've done a lot of different things, but you do have a very focused thesis, and you do seem to like seed and A stage. But maybe you could clarify that for the community here.
Absolutely. So we invest in earlier, less invasive, more accurate diagnostics enabled by technology. So we like the, point of care. We like the not a lot of hardware, ideally, and we like quantitative and qualitative, if we can, testing. So if you're finding out not just what's wrong with you, but what to do about it, or not just that there's cancer, but what's the organ of origin, and all sorts of innovative ways to really help people make, and help doctors both make better decisions. We have done both direct to consumer and direct to physician. We think that, and that was asked recently about the divide between that. I think that the direct to consumer are fine when it's syphilis or strep throat, UTIs, things like that. But the direct to doctors really is and physicians was what we need to do when it comes to cancers and things that need more informed explanation, calm minds, patient handling for really critical life-threatening decisions. But I do see the advent or the development of a lot more infectious disease focused solutions, and we have had a rise in pandemics when it comes right now to syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, all those. So there are a lot more innovative ways to identify those things, and I've seen a lot of companies in that space. As well as the cancer, Alzheimer's, mental health, all of those really critical areas. A lot of areas primarily affecting women too, which are important to us as well at the fund, because we feel like not enough solutions have been developed along those lines. Right? Not until 2017 they actually use gender diverse mice. So we feel like that's an important area that needs to be addressed in diagnostics. Essentially, women don't the same way. We don't have the same symptoms the same way. For instance, cardiac, which is one of the number one killers. So looking for solutions in those areas, in inflammation, that's an area we look at a lot, and interested in solutions in those areas, inflammatory biomarkers, and certainly the hard to identify early stage cancers. We have those one tests that are fine, but most of them don't have the data for the earliest stage 0, stage 1, stage 2. And so we're really interested in finding those kinds of solutions.
That's wonderful. Michelle, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate your insights, your perspectives. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, Stan. Thank you for doing this and bringing all this to these wonderful companies.
It's great. It's really our pleasure. So round of applause virtually for Michelle and all the good work that Digital DX is doing in their funding and helping architect future companies for society here in women's health and healthcare beyond. And you can reach her on LinkedIn. She is right here. You guys should see her LinkedIn in the chat that Sammy put out there. Also, you can connect with me as well if you have any questions for me or speaker ideas or anything else related to this. And next up, we are really excited to continue these sorts of conversations with what is happening at JPM, what happened at JPM. More importantly, don't forget to register for the February Symposium. As you know, we do these every month, the last Thursday of every month from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It goes globally to folks across North America, South America, Central America. Of course, we get a lot of folks that come in from Europe and Africa, a lot of folks in Middle East and India and Southeast Asia. So again, next month, we're going to be focusing on digital heartbeats of health, as it is the Heart Health Month. And again, we are looking forward to seeing you all in April 1st and 2nd in Europe, in Paris. Don't forget to apply to attend there. You can see the event and register the event on the hitlab.org website, or you can just message me. And we also have the New York City Health Innovation Week. So that's going to be very much like JP Morgan, except in New York City. There'll be dozens of events, thousands of people coming in from around the world to meet all their favorite people in New York City. It'll be May 6, 7, 8 will be the summit. New York City Health Innovation Week will be May 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're also going to be doing a Federal Health Innovation Day. All of our partners from Goodwin to Cooley to Columbia, Cornell, Mount Sinai, NYU, Memorial Sloan Kettering, HSS Hospital for special surgery. Everyone's going to be doing cocktail hours, breakfast briefings, luncheons, things like that. So be sure that you're in New York City that first week of May, the first full week of May, and scan there to join the summit as well at that point. So really excited to talk about that. And also looking forward to our 10% off. So the Breakthrough Alliance team is also taking new members. So if you're interested in joining, scan the QR code, use the code January when you go to join, and receive a 10% discount just for being a part of this meeting here today. So looking forward to seeing you all there. And next up, we are really excited to continue the day and hearing all about what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be seeing with some of the most revolutionary digital platforms and technologies for cancer. And we have one of the digital leaders in cancer, Stephanie Ostrich, and she'll be talking with our own John Hammett from the lab about what they're doing and how, not only what they saw at JPM, but what they're doing in terms of philanthropic venture capital. It's a big part of our ecosystem. As you all know, HITLAB has thousands of investors that are out there investing in digital health companies. But more importantly, many of those are philanthropic, whether they're family offices or whether they're folks like the Catalytic Impact Foundation Fund and the CIF Fund. They have a focus on helping folks and helping companies who are meeting unmet needs. And so with that, I will hand over the virtual stage to John and Stephanie. John, Stephanie, and you're up.
Stephanie, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm great. Great to see you too. I'm very excited to speak to you and also all the participants.
It might help to set some context. So could you take a moment or two and describe both the foundation and, more importantly, multiple myeloma for those who might not be familiar with that very devastating diagnosis, but then also a little bit about yourself, and then we can chat about what happened at JP Morgan from your perspective.
Of course, very briefly, I'm a dual citizen originally from Berlin, Germany, studied biochemistry there, then came first to Rockefeller University and then to Harvard Medical School, did my PhD there in MPA, and then I was in Big Pharma at Novartis and Roche on the business development and commercial side, and then I was in biotech companies, and since then in venture capital. Since September of 23, I'm now managing the Myeloma Investment Fund, which is the 6-year-old philanthropic fund of the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, a 26-year-old patient foundation that is providing information to myeloma patients, but is also running and financing clinical trials. Multiple myeloma is a blood cancer. It's similar to leukemia. So still, despite all of the advances in the last couple of years with more options for the patients that live longer, have longer PFS and longer OS, unfortunately, they still relapse and they die. And this is why the Myeloma Investment Fund was started, where we invest in startups with really moonshot therapies in the myeloma space. So we have now 16 active investments, have had 3 exits, and we continue to invest in companies. Sorry, John, I think you are on mute.
I was. Thank you. So that's a very rich background in terms of your career, and also a very compelling description of the dilemma of multiple myeloma, and how the foundation addresses trying to make a difference in that disease state. What I'm curious about is from your experience at JP Morgan. Was there a difference in the way in which family foundations, philanthropic foundations, venture capital, and what I call traditional business-focused venture capital were experiencing the conference and shaping the future of social impact investing? You're not in it for the money itself; you're in it to make a difference. Whereas many venture capitalists, I hate to say it, are in it for the money.
Our mission is to find a cure or contribute to a cure for multiple myeloma. But this is not in any way in conflict with our investment strategy, because if we really find a cure and support very innovative companies, we are very confident that we will also make a return, and then we will be able to start more companies that can work on this mission. So what I'm very happy about is that there are more and more foundations that are working together in syndicates with traditional investors, and that's also what we do. We are not building companies, we are not leading, we are building companies together with institutional venture capitalists. But foundations really provide a very, very important source of funding, especially also for very early stage companies. And that's the first observation also from JP Morgan. I would say we are about 80% where we were before COVID, but for the early stage companies, it's still a very, very challenging fundraising environment. And that's why it was such a silver lining to have the foundations in the mix, because they often provide funding for very early stage companies. And that's why we were able to make, since I started, 7 new investments, 6 follow-on investments, and also had an exit. So we are really supporting truly innovative science.
Well, that's certainly, and I'm the child of somebody who suffered with a myeloma disease, and so I understand the value in trying to bring better solutions to that problem. Was there a discussion or opportunity between the various categories of investors? I mean, you've made a very good case for being mission driven to essentially, focus on making a difference as well as making money, and I think that's a dual purpose. But is there a community of what I'd call philanthropic investors who band together, and do they behave differently than traditional venture capitalists in the way you approach the market or think about the way you select problems for solutions?
There's definitely a community among the foundations. We had, in fact, a dinner together at JP Morgan where we were exchanging experiences, meeting some old and new friends, and also talked about our syndicates with institutional venture capitalists. So I would say there are probably more similarities than differences between institutional venture capitalists and philanthropic venture capitalists. Again, the main difference is that the foundations have donors, not like institutional venture capitalists have LPs, they have investors, and the investors after a certain period of time expect returns. And the philanthropic donors, they expect the results, but they don't want their money back. So if we have returns, then we can invest that into new companies. And in that sense of the word, we are really patient capital. So we don't have to return the capital at a certain point. We can really stay with the companies and support them also in kind. We have a lot of experience in the disease area, very good connections to KOLs, to the centers. We also really know what the patient's needs are, and we can provide for our portfolio companies connections to other investors and also to biotech and pharma companies for partnering. So this is really the value that we can bring beyond the dollars that we can invest in the companies. And that's why often we are regarded almost as a stamp of approval by institutional investors, because we know the space so well. And then other investors also feel confident to come into the round.
Well, that implies that there's a certain amount of cooperation or collaboration between philanthropic investors and traditional investors. How does that go about? Is that something that you work out on a relationship basis, or do you actually take a lead position, or do you follow someone else's lead? I'm curious about how you collaborate and cooperate between philanthropic venture capital and traditional venture capital.
Yeah, beyond working together with other philanthropic venture funds, we have very good relationships with all the main investors in the field. And as always, it's important both if a company is working with a foundation, with a philanthropic venture capitalist, but also with an institutional venture capitalist, to really know the criteria, what is a really good fit for that investor. So what's the disease area? What is the stage when they're investing? So this can really be paired very well with the opportunity. And we have actually done an analysis. Where is our most successful deal flow coming from? And it's really from other investors, because they have also done their diligence, and this is really a relationship building. So we provide deal flow to them, they provide deal flow to us. So that's why it's a really fruitful collaboration.
Are the conditions under which you enter into an investment different? I mean, many times early stage companies get the benefit of mentorship from a venture capitalist, the board position, people who become more involved in the business. Do you take the same position with the investments you make?
We sometimes have board positions or board observer roles. At least we execute a side letter where we specify that we will have information rights and that our investment will go to the myeloma program of the company, simply so we can really advise them on the portfolio, on clinical trial strategy, on the planning, and can help them once they are in the clinic to really conduct the trial at the sites where really the patients are. So in that sense, we are really very similar to the other very involved institutional venture capitalists.
You mentioned you had a couple of successful exits. I'm going to give you an opportunity to have a little commercial for some of the businesses that you've invested in and have succeeded. I'm curious how you would describe the ones that you're most proud of.
It's a 6-year-old fund, so especially if you invest in early stage companies, it takes some time. But yeah, among our 19 total investments, we already had 3 exits, and they're usually in 2 categories. One company, in this case, it's called Tidal. It was acquired by Sanofi, and the other one, Neximune, it went public. So, and our policy is that we actually get out of this position after the lockup period, so that we can continue to foster innovation in other startup companies.
Do you have someone who conducts research on your behalf to actually scan the marketplace and look for either the academic institutions or the research institutions that are focused on the needs of the multiple myeloma patients to try to select organizations that you're interested in investing in? I mean, do you kind of go out and actually be a hunter-gatherer of some things?
And I'm very glad to have an analyst I work with. She was an analyst at a bank before, and also has a PhD and does phenomenal work. So she does a lot of the research. We're also working with our CSO and Chief Medical Officer from the foundation. The CMO is on the faculty at a New York hospital. So through that and through our MMRF connection, through our SAB members, our boards, and also the investment committee at the MIF, we have really good connections to the academic centers, to the KOLs, and we have built this over years. And so if there is an exciting opportunity, they proactively come to us with that opportunity so that we, if it's really fitting our criteria, can help to foster the innovation by helping to start companies. And then we also bring in other institutional venture capitalists.
Do you have a target range for the size of the investment that you try to make in early stage companies, number one? And then do you also do it with a sense of planning for follow-on investment? So what's the cost of entry, so to speak?
Yes, so we always, when we invest, we also reserve capital for follow-on investments, and depending on the size of the investments, that's what's determined whether we take board roles or board observer roles. So it depends on how early or late stage the company is, what our equity position is, but definitely we definitely reserve capital for follow-on investments for our companies, and really want to stay with them and support them in the long term.
Yeah. So is there a minimum maximum range that you look at for your preliminary investment?
So we typically invest 1 million per round, 5 million per company, but that obviously depends on the stage of the company. Sometimes we tranche our investments. It depends on the syndicate, and it depends, on the plans of the company in total.
So, our topic was originally about the venture capital trends at JP Morgan, and we've kind of wandered around a little bit, about what you do and how you do it and why you do it. And I think that's been a very rich discussion. But I'm curious, as we kind of wind down to the end here, what were the highlights of your time at JP Morgan, and what were the either disappointments or lowlights, in the sense of you expected A but you got B?
Yeah, the observations were that there's definitely a lot of really high science innovation ongoing. Met a lot of exciting companies we will hopefully be able to support this year. I observed that it's still very hard for companies, especially young companies, to raise capital. It's a very concentrated funding environment. It goes into certain areas, neuroscience, metabolic area, and it also goes to more later stage opportunities. Ideally, investors and also pharma partners want to see clinical trial data. And also the area where we are, immuno-oncology, CAR-T, that's an area where you really have to have very, very competitive data in order to get funded. So that was a little bit of a challenge. And also, even though the IPO window is slightly open, we still haven't seen really big M&As and a lot of collaborations on the pharma side. So I hope that we will see more activity in 2025, and that this will help to fuel this whole cycle, so that more early stage companies can also be funded. So in summary, I would say there's a lot of activity on the scientific side, but the funding environment, especially for young companies, is still very challenging. But I'm an eternal optimist, and I think we see the light at the end of the 2025 tunnel, hopefully.
You made an interesting comment, and I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent because you talked about clinical trial and evidence being so important. And as you probably know, HITLAB is an evidence-based organization. One of the points of value we bring to our the sponsors of our work is to focus on what is the evidence of outcome improvement or success of a new solution, and also what's the likelihood of it being economically successful. Again, what are the evidence? And so I'm curious if you're seeing a trend to more evidence in early stage companies, or is that still a shortfall as we've seen in many digitally oriented organizations?
Many of the companies now also use AI for target identification in the drug discovery process. But yeah, both the pharma companies and also the regulators still want to see validation in animal models. So even though I'm personally very bullish on AI, I think we're not quite there yet where we can have completely in silico trials. Everybody still wants to see validation and data. So yeah, I think this is still a little bit in the future, but what AI and other technologies can do is definitely to speed up the process, make it cheaper, and just use more data and use more evidence. And I'm sure we'll see more of this in the not too distant future.
Well, one final question, because this is a digital health conference. Have you seen any increase over the 5 or 6 years of your fund, an increase of digitally focused solutions within the therapeutic area of treating multiple myeloma, or is it still a hard science arena?
Depends on how you define digital solutions. We have invested in one company that is using AI for target identification in aberrant splicing. So RNA gets spliced, and sometimes there's errors there. And the company we have invested in, they have found, also together with some data from a real-world data study that we conducted, a number of promising myeloma targets, and we're very excited about the validation in the clinic, and we will continue to also invest in companies that use AI for these purposes.
Right. Well, Stephanie, thank you. This has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much for a great conference. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Outstanding. John, thank you for that great interview. And again, just to give the audience an idea of where we are in the agenda, we are coming right up with Savan Devani, who is the founder and the CEO of BioTrillion, the digital doctor in everyone's pocket on a cell phone that we were just talking about an hour ago when we just introduced the agenda. And then right after that, Matthew Holt, one of the cornerstone digital health thought leaders over the last 30 years, and talking with him about his perspectives on what's going on in digital health and JPM. But with that, John, handing the virtual mic over to you again.
Before we actually get into this, I'll put a little bit of context around it. You represent one of the winners of the HITLAB Breakthrough Alliance challenge that we concluded last fall at our summit meeting. And so thank you both for being an applicant and a challenge member, and more importantly, congratulations. We're glad that you were up there on the stage along with a couple of other winning organizations.
Thank you.
But it would be interesting if you could kind of give us a quick summary of your background and a little bit of a summary of your business, and then we can drill a little more deeply into the things that you're solving and how they're bringing potential value to the needs of the population at large.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Savan Devani, and I like to think of myself as a lifelong bioengineer. I studied bioengineering undergrad and grad school, and then I got drawn to the business side of things on Wall Street, but covering biotech, medtech, and diagnostics. So I've always been focused, and that business background really gave me a lot of skills. And then after a personal calamity, I realized, healthcare is so broken. It took me that long to realize it. And then I decided to come back to my bioengineering roots and start BioTrillion.
Well, that's that's a great story, and and the one thing I would add to your story is that my early undergraduate work was in chemical engineering. Before I found that I loved studying it, I hated doing it. I ended up going on to the MBA. Yeah. But one of the first things
Teaches you how to think.
was if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. All right, and so
Oh,
that's.
I'm so glad you used the word measure because that's part of the theme that we're going to be discussing.
Well, that's exactly what I was trying to do, is build the bridge into our discussion. And so, yeah, the challenge in healthcare, of course, is the initial examination and focusing on the potential problem that you're trying to solve with a patient or the community of patients around a therapeutic need. So I'm curious about how you go about setting up that stage for scaling healthcare monitoring. How does your platform measure biomarkers, but more importantly, measure them so quickly to be able to give you that, what I'd call more focused diagnosis?
Yeah, absolutely. So you use the word scale, and when we think of the word scale, digital often comes to mind as one of the counterparts to the physical world. And so healthcare has been historically defined by physical constraints, devices that must be worn, touched, used in clinical settings. Even the clinical setting itself is a physical centralized location. And our innovation is to eliminate those constraints. And so we start with the smartphone because it's almost like everyone's third limb. 5 billion people in the world have one. And we want to turn that into a health monitor. And so with the advent of AI and powerful new techniques, especially in computer vision, we train that smartphone, software only, to measure these milliscale physiologic changes in the eyes and face, because that's where the phone and the face interact passively 100 times a day. Contrast that with 1 time per year in a physical setting. And we use that what are called our BioEngine 4D is our platform to measure a variety of biomarkers, all based on clinically known endpoints or signs of disease. So take heart rate, hand tremor, pupil dilation, and we do this from a 10-second selfie video. And so I can get into more detail, but that's the essence of it. We call it a healthy selfie.
Well, you've got the tagline down pat. I love it. And so rather than delve more deeply into how does that work, because I think a number of our participants may want to follow up on that. I'm curious about how did you discover that, and then how did you go about verifying that that was a useful way to examine the characteristics of somebody before we begin to get into the diagnosis itself?
All right. Well, I hope I don't get too nerdy on you or philosophical, but I'll tell you some of the thought process. Medicine has evolved over thousands of years based on, prior to technology or medical diagnostics, doctors would use their own senses, their eyes, their ears, their hands, to observe a patient and measure clinically known signs of disease. And so think of pupil size as an example, or eye edema, or even eye saccades. A doctor would observe these things, and they still do today oftentimes, just manually, which is really, that is antithetical to the word measure. And so what we get are very subjective, oftentimes inconsistent points that are labeled verbally. And what we now, 5 billion of us, have a very powerful modality in our pocket. It's the optical modality of a smartphone. If you were to think of all the different modalities, acoustic, kinetic, optical, right? That optical modality, we know, gets better and better every year. Thank you, Apple and Samsung, for investing billions of dollars in it. But it's no longer going to be sufficient for photography or compelling enough for photography. And so now with these better cameras and other optical sensors, we can get into these really fine details, taking, say, heart rate. Let's use heart rate as an example. The way a traditional pulse oximeter works is through something called photoplasmography, PPG, where they send a light into the finger and they have a sensor to measure the absorption refraction back. And so if you think about it, when we're out in the real world, natural light is that emitter, and our cameras can serve as that sensor. And based on really complex algorithms, we can turn that into what we call remote photoplasmography and measure heart rate and other vitals. So it's a little bit of a under the hood view on one of the biomarkers.
Well, it's fascinating, and I certainly enjoy both the journey you're on, and I'm trying to imagine where it will go. And there's two dimensions of where it could go that I'm curious about. One is, assuming that this proves to be both successful from a clinical point of view and successful economically, how can this change what I call the global marketplace for strong diagnosis and early treatment across the board? Because cell phones and the cameras are ubiquitous, and so it strikes me that you're poised to enter the market of helping people globally with a very simple tool that we keep in our pocket or on our handbag. So I'm curious if you thought about that, and more importantly.
Oh, absolutely. That's when I think of healthcare, I don't think of services, diagnostics, pharma, biotech. I think of it as a continuum, and we tend to think of healthcare as either prevention or intervention, left and right. I think there's this big gap in the middle called detection that is often sort of ignored. And we know the medical setting exists on the right side, the interventional side, but our life setting is where we spend 99% of our time. So if we're only spending 1% of our life in a medical setting, hoping that at that once a year checkup, a disease sign is observed, if not measured, we're spending 99% of our life in the dark. And so what we need to do is we need to empower consumers with tools for that 99% window when they're living their life in the life setting, at home or work. And I think we'll look back and realize there's a massive asymmetry, a massive arbitrage opportunity, if you will, to put solutions in the life setting. We all seen sort of early versions of it with, very specific biomarker-based tools, but focus only on one biomarker. And if you're pre-diagnostic, you're not going to buy 10 devices. So how do we take the device that's already in our pocket and empower it with that breadth to have multiple pathway biomarkers, multimodal even, so that someone who's pre-diagnostic or even younger can still have a tool that measures potential disease signs. And so the impact, to get back to that, is extremely transformative when we think of life setting and smartphone, that 99% window. And even if it's passive, being able to capture measures every time you look at your phone is extremely transformative, not only for the consumer in being able to empower them. Our platform is called BioEngine 4D, and that 4D means digitally decentralized disease detection. So that's a clear need for the consumer, but also for the clinician. there are needs for a clinician to remotely measure a patient. If we just think of telehealth today, telehealth is no different today than a phone call 50 years ago, because it's one way in communication. It's often the patient communicating symptoms, not signs. And a doctor does not have the ability to measure the patient like they would when you go into physical medical visit. The first thing that's measured are vitals. So between the consumer side of the market or the enterprise, providers, pharma, even payers, there's tremendous opportunity for a solution like this that scales.
So I'm going to kind of take us down a final sprint to, I think, an important perspective, which is, we tend to use the word healthcare, and we tend to use digital healthcare as labels or headlines. But as we know, healthcare is not uniform. It's not ubiquitous. It's not consistent. In fact, some call it fragmented, broken, inefficient, yada yada. You pick your kind of complaint. And most importantly, healthcare around the world is quite different than healthcare in the US. So that said, where can the capability you've been describing, which is the healthy selfie, fit into the world in which you've got providers and payers and patients and governmental institutions all vying for influence over the way in which money is spent in healthcare? Because it seems to me you've got an opportunity for people to be able to much more quickly understand the nature of the dilemma they feel or they're experiencing. But how does that turn into action through all of those other gatekeepers who still have a very strong influence?
Yeah, well, as a realist, healthcare is a very stakeholder conflicted industry. We have to play ball with the three primary stakeholders. If you provide value to them, I believe they will adopt your solution. So I mentioned providers in telehealth. They're interested in more billable services, right? So now with remote or with telehealth, every time they measure your heart rate, even when they weigh you, they bill that to as a service. Pharma needs to decentralize clinical trials. Being able to scale trials massively in a quick amount of time and measure endpoints is an extremely valuable proposition to them. And payers want to understand risk. And then I would say there's this belief that the consumer will never be a part of that healthcare journey, of their own healthcare journey. I think that's true today, but in the long term, I think that's equivalent of saying PCs are just for enterprises, right? So eventually we will decentralize to all consumers, and consumers will be able to measure early risks about their own health to then catalyze a move into the clinical setting. So that's why I say digital doctor, not meant to replace physical human doctors, but to serve as your 24/7 co-pilot, which then tells you to move into the interventional setting much earlier than you otherwise would have, and complement that digital doctor who can make a clinically confirmatory diagnosis. So that extends even down to people in villages, right, who are 100 miles away from the clinic, but all have a smartphone in their pocket and need something to triage whether they should make that journey or not.
Well, Savannah, this has been a superb conversation. I'm a believer in, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I am a consumer of a variety of biometric devices that I use to measure my own health. I want to add your solution to my portfolio of measurement capabilities, and we'll have that conversation after we conclude our discussion. So thank you very much. This is exciting.
Absolutely.
It's a potential game-changing solution for the world of healthcare. And so all I can say is God bless and look forward to more success.
Thank you. You already look at the solution every day. Thank you.
John, thank you very much for that terrific interview. And again, Simon, thank you for joining us. We've got a lot to cover. We've got the last quarter of the second hour to finish up here, and we've got a lot to do. And next up is going to be one of your favorite digital health curmudgeons, Matthew Holt. But first, we need to let you know that there's another Breakthrough General Fellowship up for grabs. And this is, again, a $99 value. It gets you into the community on a number of different points of exclusive content and community and the HITLAB internal Slack channel on the HITLAB Hub. So be the first one. When you click on that link in the chat box, and you are then forwarded over to the hitlab.org website, be the first one to enter 2025. And you can, or not the first one, it's a raffle. You will be in the hopper for being selected as a HITLAB General Fellow, hoping that you guys can join, and looking forward to seeing another one of you in our HITLAB Hub meetings and HITLAB BTA meetings. Next up, we have our own Matthew Holt, who is an author. He is a social media superstar. He is Cambridge University trained out of the UK, and I forget the name of the university on the West Coast, some small liberal arts school in Palo Alto trained. But he is someone who has been analyzing, understanding, and implementing digital health technologies since the dot-com boom of the mid-90s. And he's here today to talk a little bit more about what he is seeing in navigating the future of digital health and understanding where some of the adoption is going to go and where some of the financing is going to go toward helping getting that adoption up and running. One of the things that we're excited to talk about is, again, something that you heard about earlier in the program called New York City Health Innovation Week. And so New York City Health Innovation Week is a one-week program that will have thousands of people coming in from around the world to meet and to put together partnerships and alliances and to just have a set up of numerous groups of people. Oh, it looks like Matt is ready to go. Matt, can you hear me?
Hi, this is Matthew Holt. I've decided to use this AI you've probably heard of to become more attractive, younger, and more intelligent. And isn't that really the entire aim of this healthcare technology people keep banging on about? On the other hand, there's only so much I can do using this avatar, so perhaps I should try an alternative. Perhaps something peppier. Yes, I think I'll try Peppy Priya.
So I'm Peppy Priya playing Matthew Holt, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my thoughts on the digital health market, where the money is going, which sectors seem most attractive to investors, and why there seems to be a bigger underlying problem. On the other hand, none of you believe that I'm really Matthew Holt. So perhaps we can change to an avatar who is rather closer to the crotchety old man you are expecting to see.
Okay, so I'm the real Matthew Holt, at least the real AI version of myself. If I had the time, energy, and money, I could do what Reid Hoffman has done. He's the founder of LinkedIn, a billionaire, and he's basically created a twin avatar of himself attached to an LLM that spits out essentially very similar thoughts to him. I, of course, am far too poor and cheap to do that, so this avatar of me is just saying the words I type. But of course, anyone can link it to an LLM fed whatever it likes, and you can converse with it, just like you can now literally talk to OpenAI's ChatGPT-OH. There are several companies building similar tools in healthcare, and I'll talk a little about them and where they might be used a little later. But I suspect that you've had enough of the different versions of me, although you might not be saying that after you have to listen to the real me in a moment. By the way, all of these avatars were built using a service called HeyGen. It'll also let you speak multiple languages. You might want to play around with it yourself, but at the least you'll get the idea of how easy it is going to be to create relatively lifelike content. And in a business like health and medical care, when delivering content and information is a huge part of what happens, there are certainly enormous possibilities where this type of technology could be transformational. Okay, I'm going back to being the real me, and I'll show you some.
At the end of this call, you'll figure out whether my AI avatar is better than my real avatar or the real me. It all looks kind of the same. But I think you get the idea that there's a lot you can now do with these very simple tools. That was all free, cheap. It's the same stuff that Reid Hoffman uses for his Reid AI. And you can get the idea pretty quickly, I think, that we're going to a world in which what is real, who knows, but multiple people can distribute multiple amounts of information. And if you add it to an LLM, do it interactively. So I think that's a very interesting way that we'll see that. And I had a bit of fun putting that together. And I would like to be younger and better looking. All right, let me take you to a more traditional presentation we're going to show. And I'm just going to go in a few minutes through what I've seen over the last little bit. It actually so happens that at the end of the year, I do hopefully you can all see this now, I do a presentation, usually in Japan, I kind of sum up what happened in the year. So I'm really giving you a version of that with a little bit more of what just happened in the last couple of weeks. Clearly, AI is a screaming big deal, but we've got to say that the investment in AI is going against an interesting background. So you may well recall, if you were around the last few years, that we had a digital health boom. Stan Krishnowski and I have known each other since, God, 1996 or something, horrendously long time ago, when there was an e-health boom in the dot-com world. Nothing like as big as the boom we saw in health technology in the recent years. But over the last couple of years, those public stocks have completely collapsed. This is Teladoc and Amwell and Q Health. Q Health's even now out of business, even though it did a Super Bowl ad a few years ago. And their stocks, as you can see, down 90%. Venture funding, similar, right? If you look between the middle of 2020 and the middle of 2022, according to the Rock Health numbers, something in the order of $50 billion in that sort of 2-year period was spent. So 25 to 30 billion a year at one point. But now we're down at 10 billion, and even last year it's still bumping along the bottom of the cliff. It's so depressing that Startup Health gave up counting it. All right, so for Teladoc and Amwell last year, 2023, 24, no real change. They're still down. So we're not seeing any recovery in the public markets, and that's important. I want you to hold on to that as we talk about where new investment is going. Also, there are still some really big bets being made and failing all up and down. We know that Walmart pulled out of retail healthcare, sold off all its assets. This company Forward, which was trying to reinvent primary care using algorithms and AI and God knows what else, also shut down. So there's still lots of things where even if you're an incumbent or a well-funded entrant, you're struggling to succeed in this new world of digital health and digital health services. Couple of things that are working. This is the HIMSS stock chart, HIMSS and hers, and you'll notice in the middle of this last past year, their stock exploded, right? Towards the end of the year, definitely increased. Why? Because they're selling GLP-1s, right? They are selling for cash compounded GLP-1s. They're going to have a Super Bowl ad all about that apparently coming up. So that's one area, the area of direct-to-consumer sale of things that are cash-based seems to be doing quite well. Another area that's doing very well in healthcare, as ever, selling to pharma. Selling to big pharma has always been profitable. This is the chart of Doximity. You noticed in the last part of last year, their stock really took off. They've been a very profitable platform where doctors communicate with each other. They have lots of tools on that platform, but most importantly, they make their money by marketing from pharma to doctors. Whether it's effective or not, who knows, but it's certainly very profitable. They're an extremely profitable company, by far the most profitable company in digital health. So just sort of go over sort of the end of year conclusions. Back in 2023, we had this hangover from the big funding boom. It was even worse in the private markets. The private markets almost completely dried up. I used to run a chat show with Jess DeMassa, and we used to talk about new funding deals. And there was like, $100 to $300 million plus deals a week in that period. And then they just stopped completely. And in fact, a lot of very well-funded companies like Olive and some others evaporated. And a lot of the other companies were crammed together in M&A by their investors. Over the last year, it's got a little bit stranger. So it's not easy to raise money, accepting AI. So we'll talk about that in a second. But there are still plenty of companies who are shutting down or getting crammed together for massive losses. There are however, a few deals for late-stage companies coming through, and there are a couple of IPOs on the deck. And funnily enough, there are some quite high valuations in the private market with certain kinds of companies. which I want you to bear in mind when we go into the last part of this. So here are the IPOs. If you squint very hard, you can call Waystar, which is a revenue cycle management company, and Tempus, which is a sort of advanced AI diagnostics company. If you squint hard, you can call them digital health tech, and they've seemed to have done quite well, even though they're both losing money in terms of their market caps. More interestingly, on deck and allegedly coming this year, both Amada and Hinge Health, which are much more traditional digital health tech services companies, in one case doing chronic disease management around weight loss and diabetes, and the other one around back pain and knee pain, Muscular's MSK. They are going to come to the market, and we're going to see how that works. I'm fascinated to read their S1s. Both those companies have been around a long while. Both of them got very, very large employer bases. And they are kind of the archetypal. We'll see if there is going to be a second wave of successful digital health companies coming to the public market. And they'll really be a harbinger. If they work well when they come out this year, as has been highly rumored, then I think there is sort of hope for the market as a whole. If they don't work well, that's going to be interesting. Now, of course, while this has been going on, we have this massive boom in AI, and it's a real boom. All the money is actually basically going to one company. You've all heard of it, NVIDIA. But just look at this, right? Literally gone from doing $8 billion a quarter to doing $30 billion a quarter in revenue. I mean, in a year and change. I mean, that kind of growth is just absolutely astounding. You very, very rarely see that, which is why it's the dominant stock trend in the market, and why when it goes up and down like it did last week, people get very excited. This actually makes this the most expensive leather jacket in history, I believe. There's the CEO, Jensen Huang. But the hype in AI about AI in healthcare is also huge. I pulled this off one of those research reports offline. And look at this. It claims there's going to be a CAGR of 50% a year for 6 years. Every time you see a market like that, even if this is pure hype, it's pretty interesting that you're seeing that much attention being paid to it. So think of a couple of different places this lives. So this is one place it's moving is into the hospital. This is the firm Care AI, which recently got bought by Stryker. This is me testing out their AI. Says that my position in bed is unsafe, by the way. This kind of thing in the hospital and nursing homes you're going to see much more of, is using AI to try to figure out how patients are doing in all types of different ways. AI to supplement and replace nursing. This is, again, stuff NVIDIA is powering with a company called Hippocratical AI. That's the idea here, is that these nurses can basically have a conversation, kind of like those avatars I showed you earlier, attached to an LLM, and that can take a long time. And there's been some very encouraging discussions about this from folks like Intermountain and others. So we'll see how that grows. But again, it's much, much cheaper, obviously, than having a real human do it. And then I said a while back in 2023 that ambient dictation was going to take off. Here's some of the companies involved, and this little past year, it's clearly true. Here's Kaiser rolling it out, and Commure, which bought Augmetics, has now rolling out with HCA. So this is really starting to take off. So just to sort of conclude, there are three main areas, I think, where we're seeing investment in healthcare, and they all obviously intermingle. One is pure AI. One is SaaS, typical technology being delivered to incumbents. And the third one is services. So ton of companies are doing pure AI. I'm going to include so Slingshot is a company which is trying to start figuring out how do you do therapy sessions with AI. Hello Patient is kind of like Hippocratic, doing conversations with patients. Infinitus is doing back and forth conversations between doctors' offices and health plans around prior authorization, all done by bot on the phone. And Elios is a specialist, like Nabrus, specialist ambient scribing company just for the mental health area. And Qualified Health is a brand new company which is basically trying to deliver agents and guardrail-based AI, they call it, for hospital systems. So that's one area, a lot of activity in there. Second area is these companies like Commure, Innovaccer, Cuventus, all using AI, but basically to help improve internal hospital operations. And the third area is people delivering services. And I think the interesting thing here is some of these companies pick Hone or Alera or Nima. Hone is in male, is sort of care for men, again, on online telehealth. Alara is for women with PCOS, and Nima is for women, is primarily for women with PTSD from sexual assault survivors. These kinds of companies are trying to agglomerate demand across the whole nation for very specific things that they're going to do very well, using a sort of telehealth service as a basis. Plenty of other companies doing similar things. Worth noting that these are the fundings just in the last month since the start of this year for all these companies. So there's a fair amount of interest in these areas, but obviously the SaaS area and the AI area are getting more money than the others. So what's the problem I mentioned? I was then with this. Here's the market cap of all those big companies, right? So you can see Doximity at the very top here, which has got 10 billion in market cap. So it's a real success story. HIMSS is around 7 billion. These are numbers I pulled yesterday. There just aren't very many companies, though, with very large market caps above $1 billion. We've only got, 11 there. And if you're seeing some of the investments, which are going 200 million in, 300 million in, at a rate, at a valuation which may be in the, over $1 billion, or in some cases like Headway, over 2 billion. How these companies can go to the public market and perform when most of the companies have gone public down the list here, have got very low market caps, been losing money, is going to be a real struggle. So that's the thing that I think you really have to watch out for. Obviously, there's a lot of consolidation. A lot of companies are scooping up cheaper companies' evaluations. Some of these are taking off the public market companies. So Accolade and Augmedix have been pulled off the public market by private companies. Even yesterday, Neuroflow bought Quartet, which had more than 250 million into it. So you will see a lot of consolidation at the sort of the bottom end of the market. But in general, I think the big question is, how do you get an exit for most of these digital health companies? I read a whole article about saying that there was no exit. There may be one, but that's the thing to watch in the next 12 months. What are the type of exits? What are the type of things we're going to see? And does it make sense to be investing these really large rounds in these late stage companies if there is no easy way out? And with that, I will shut up and take any questions if there are any. I think I've taken my 15 minutes, so I shall shut up.
One quick question. Now, look, this is brilliant. Really appreciate the analysis. And again, for those of you who don't know Matt, please do look him up on LinkedIn. His LinkedIn is in the chat on the side, as well as mine. If you want to link in and connect on other ideas for topics, more ways for bringing Matt into the ecosystem on a regular basis. I think that the big question, Matt, is you were at JP Morgan. We've had several guests already on today talking about JPM and what they saw and how they've seen it change over the last few years post-pandemic. What were some of your insights and some of your observations and perspectives based upon your experiences over the last 20 years?
Well, my biggest insight was that you were looking like a Russian Politburo member with your grey suit. Stan, which I enjoyed. Stan and I, for those who don't know, we're bonded by a love of whiskey and snowboarding, and as well as digital health. It's been going for far too many years. But I think that the conversation really is twofold. It's this issue of how do you get out? Is there a way? Is there a rational way? There are VCs who still are investing in AI. We know AI on the public market is massively overvalued. As I just showed you, most digital health companies, are losing money and are valued very cheaply at the moment. So there's this private public market complexity around, it's not just AI companies that get invested in it. It's mostly AI, but it's not just AI. And, what happens? The second issue you heard a lot about, right, is how aggressively either pharma companies or hospital systems or some sort of health plans are buying these new types of tools to do whatever they need to do, right? There's been a lot of criticism in the health plan world about use of AI, particularly around the United Healthcare assassination and murder and all that stuff. And, was there too much use of denials of care and stuff? So I think there's some trepidation there. There was a lot of nervousness in general A lot of these big health plans didn't show up, right? And there was security everywhere. And so I think that area is still a little bit under, some nervousness. And I think the real question is how fast hospitals, who are the biggest spenders in America in healthcare, start adopting these tools. They spent a long time adopting and ingesting digital electronic medical records. And it's a 20-year period, essentially, 15-year period that we've been through. They're now at the point where they're trying to do stuff with data. There was some announcements of a company called Truveta I didn't talk about, which is a bunch of hospitals serving up data, who announced at JPM, serving up data and combining it and trying to resell it. There's a lot of questions about how do you figure all that out? How do you figure the data part out? But I would look at things like Innovasa, things like Qventus, things like the companies that Cumulus adopted, and see how fast is it happening that these hospitals are really acquiring these new tools and trying to sort of change their internal operations in the way they reach out to doctors and the way they manage their internal operations using these new tools. If it's the same pace that digital health has always gone at, then I think, which is slow, then I think we have a big problem. If it really does speed up, and maybe it is, I mean, Hippocratic, not that I'm in love with the CEO, I think he's a con man, but they announced that they had 25 hospitals about to sign, with their new nurse avatars. You could actually see some significant changes. I don't know. I'm always nervous when I expect fast change because, Stan, you and I have seen this for so long and how slow the progress has been, for so many decades now. So I don't want to give you a good answer. There may be an exit. So I'm looking forward to the exits. And I think that's the thing to watch is what does the stock market do over the next little bit with these digital health companies. That's the thing to watch.
No, really good to have you, Matt. Thank you for the expertise, the perspectives, and the insights, and looking forward to sharing a whiskey with you at the New York City Health Innovation Week in May in New York City.
Looking forward to it.
All right, cheers. Take care.
Thanks.
Always a blast talking to Matthew Holt, again, on the West Coast, Silicon Valley based, and in touch with a lot of the big innovations going on. And speaking of big innovations, we have New York City's own Unica Alexander, the co-founder and CEO of the Proficient Lab, which is one of those companies that Matt was just talking about that actually is growing fast and seeing very nice month over month, year over year growth. Just as a way of introducing you to the audience for folks who don't know who you are and what you do, if you could do a 1-minute background on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in the hospital systems. I am a laboratory professional, so licensed clinical laboratory scientist. A lot of my background has been in the operations and regulatory side of just making things run from both the hospital life science space, and we've grown into building a full quality management system that utilizes AI to ensure that some of the mundane tasks are just more efficient in hospital systems and life science organizations. And this is what we do, and this is part of my expertise, and I'm happy to be here and share more today.
It's fantastic. And obviously, we've heard a lot about AI today. AI was what everybody was talking about at JPM this past month or earlier this month. But when you look at what you're doing and how you guys are working and transforming the lab systems, what is it doing specifically to improve things like efficiency and compliance in the lab quality management systems? And what are some of the tangible benefits that people are seeing from your platform?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So right now with quality management data, for anyone who doesn't really understand what that means, it means that behind every test and behind every results that we see, whether we're talking about a hospital system or a life science organization, there's a trail of quality management that happens behind the scenes to ensure that what you're getting is accurate. And at the end of the day, this is a lot of data. So the question is, how can we use AI to really help us move these processes along? How do we minimize the human effort in terms of getting from A to Z from a quality management standpoint? So these are some of the things that we're seeing that we're able to tangibly change at this point with the help of AI. How do we take months and months of audits and months of pulling together data and statistical analysis. How do we condense that into a week of work or days of work? So these are some of the things that we're using AI for to help us push quality management along in a more efficient and more accurate way.
That's incredible. And let's stay on this AI thread for a minute here and double click on that. I mean, everyone knows labs face some of the most regulatory oversight in healthcare. The requirements are absolutely ridiculous. The quality checks, the reviews, the audits are all over the place. And so when you look at what you're doing with AI, how are you using it to help labs, things like basic stuff like just reduce human error, double check some of the stuff that's going on, and then make sure that they're staying ahead of the regulations?
Yeah, so this is really where predictive analytics come into play. So the first part of it is obviously, gathering the data. Once you have the data and you're able to make those connections with AI, how can we take, the complexities of compliance, whether we're talking about FDA or ISO or, whatever those regulations are, how do we use these standardized regulations and use AI to provide us with predictive analytics and to actually prevent errors before they happen? How are we using AI for that? So this is one of the things that we could really capitalize on in terms of taking these cumbersome, whether it's an audit or whether it's just looking at your KPIs or your quality indicators, how can we use AI to bridge that gap and ensure that we're getting to the endpoint quicker? So yeah, that's one thing that we are very much looking forward to in terms of just ensuring AI can help our systems.
It's amazing. And so let's dive into some of the real world examples. Everyone wants to know, how is digital actually moving the needle? And your company is growing really well. Again, the HITLAB scientific group we did a analysis of the platform. It came out thumbs up, A+ ratings in terms of heuristics and really user experience, user design, user interface. And so when you're looking at the real world examples of what your customers are seeing when they're implementing your system, what are some of the lessons that you're learning? What are some of the lessons that they're learning from these implementations?
Yeah, so some of the lessons that we're learning is really how do we take this human factor and how do we optimize it? So a lot of times we find that in our quality management systems, there is quite a bit of repetition. And this is, we may say great repetition, so what? But the fact of the matter is that every time someone has to repeat a redundant process, it's more time spent out of your workforce that takes away from actually doing the science that they're meant to do. It's more cost for your bottom line in terms of being able to optimize your workforce. So being able to have AI pull these processes together is something that is very valuable from multiple standpoints, not just from ensuring that your human resources is actually optimized, but ensuring that you're not overspending for tasks that could be optimized with AI. So that's one of the ways. And this comes with us implementing processes like method validation, which is something that takes months to do. How do we take that month-long, that 3-4 month-long process and condense it into something that's more tangible? Another thing that we're very excited about is how do we optimize and mobilize our workforce using AI? So at the end of the day, we are collecting a lot of data on our workforce, and this is the type of data that only lives in quality management systems. How is someone trained? How are their skills assessed? Now, at this point, can we take this data and can we have AI analyze this data so we understand who's good at what? How can we really place our teams in the right places? How can we mobilize this data so that if someone is basically in one health system, how can we move them to another health system and have AI say, okay, this is what this person is good at. This is how we could really optimize this person's role in another facility. So these are all of the things that we're using AI for in our system.
That's great. And these days, everyone's worried about security, right? We saw what happened last year with Change Healthcare. We saw what happened with a number of health systems, United Healthcare included, just with hacks and things like that, and all kinds of issues with breakdowns and security. AI is all about data. AI is all about, and at the end of the day, data security plays a huge role in how AI is being rolled out, how it's being managed, and how it's able to continuously provide value. And if the security is not there, then at the end of the day, the executives the physicians, the patients, the lab techs, they're not going to feel comfortable about it.
Yeah.
What's Proficient Labs doing around making sure that the data and the AI and everything around it is being locked up and is airtight security?
Yeah, I mean, that goes with, I think any system, whether you have AI implemented or whether you don't have AI implemented, it's a matter of really ensuring that you have a robust encryption, that the way data is accessed through multi-factor authentication to ensure that even in the background, as we're using AI, we're continuously validating the model, ensuring that the outputs are meeting the need. But in terms of the actual security and what we're doing, like we're doing, no less than the utmost of what needs to be done to ensure that the individuals who need access to the system are gaining access to the system. And sometimes it may take, an additional authentication or an additional step to ensure that you're, gaining, access to the right people in the right places. But all of this is important to ensure that we don't have these type of breaches. So this is things that we take extremely, we put a very high value on. And it's just part of, creating a system, whether there's AI or not. It's impossible to have your customers, your clients trust you if you're not able to build that layer of security in, and that come in. And that's something that we do.
Yeah, that's right. And, just to wrap up, we got about a minute left here. What are some of the innovations that folks that are working in the lab management systems, what are some of the digital innovations and AI innovations that you can tell them that they can look forward to hopefully make their lives easier in the coming years?
I'm sorry, I missed the last thing that you said.
What are some of the innovations that AI is going to bring to lab systems over the next few years?
Yeah, I think some of the things that I think AI is going to bring is that as we're able to connect more of our systems, so say we're able to connect our EHRs to our LISs and to our QMS, having AI able to take our quality management or take our different analytics from one end of the spectrum to another for the different systems that we use in our life science and healthcare system is going to be huge, because it's really going to allow us to move beyond just using AI for patient information or using AI for quality management. Like, how do we bridge those gaps? And I think that's going to be really big. The other thing that I think AI is going to help with is as we're able to mobilize data, like we're doing employee data specifically, like we're doing with the Proficient Lab, really getting those details and understanding where our employees are, good and where they need improvement and how we could really move that data. Really being able to do that gives us a look at what's available beyond a resume. So I think as we get network effect where, we're really evaluating our workforce on what their skills are and not just what they present in a resume, it's going to be it's really going to have a huge impact on the industry, because we will be able to manage our resources better, which is extremely important as we think of workforce shortages and staffing issues and just the burnout that we're seeing on the industry scale.
This is great. Unica, thank you so much for joining us today, and keep up the great work. I mean, just the innovations that you and your team are putting together every month are truly impressive, really amazing. And we're looking forward to seeing great things coming out of the Proficient Labs in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Again, everyone, if you haven't connected, her LinkedIn is in the chat. Definitely connect with the Proficient Labs team. And, again, if you know someone who's running a lab and they need lab management systems, get in touch with her right away. And next up is another transformer, another innovator in digital health. And in this case, we're talking about someone who's really helping older adults age in place and age at home, so their home becomes their forever home. Grayson Robinson, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm great, Stan. How are you? Thank you
Good.
so much
Thanks
for
for
having
joining.
me.
Thank you for joining today, and really appreciate you taking time out, knowing how busy you are with the platform and getting it rolled out. And wanted to just start with a little bit of your journey. If you could just tell the audience here today a little bit about your background and Renova Health.
Yeah, sure. So my background is in interior design. I have a background in senior living and healthcare design and business development. So for about 2.5 decades, I worked in the interior design space, both in, residential as well as commercial and hospitality. But then I really focused in senior living and healthcare. And during that time frame, I realized that, with the number of individuals turning 65 every day and the lack of really affordable housing to help meet the needs of a growing elderly population, how are we going to be able to, and the affordability factor as well in terms of senior care communities, how could we begin to think about aging in place differently and as a potential bridge between living in community and then if you need more enhanced care, going to live within senior living communities themselves. So I decided to, at that time, we were working pretty exclusively within point cloud computing, ArchiCAD. And so I thought, if we're using this technology within architectural drawings and modeling, what would preclude us from being able to develop a technology where you're able to run a home safety analysis of a space and have it based off of activities of daily living and desired outcomes, and then link it with accessible design and injury prevention products so that people can really learn about aging in place, why they should think of modifying their environment before falls occur in the home. My own mom had 5 falls in 7 years, really beginning around 68, and I didn't live nearby her at the time, so it was agonizing to experience as her daughter because I really couldn't be there, and she wasn't living in the same home in which she had been in for many, many years, and so she couldn't modify it at the time, and it provided me with a lot of insight into perhaps possibilities that could occur now that we have these different means of rapid acceleration in digital twins and in AI computes in terms of looking at the built environment in a given way and how to harness physical AI.
It's amazing. And seriously, I mean, again, for the audience, the HITLAB scientists have actually done a run through of her platform. And again, extraordinarily, one of the most complex technological platforms we've seen at the lab in a long time, and very, very sophisticated, using cell phones and stuff that you can get on your cell phone, but being able to map spaces and houses and different apartments and older adult residences. It's just extraordinary, Grace, and just hats off to everything you've done and what your team has done. One of the questions, just really interested to find out about this, is given everything you've done around this kind of age tech product, what are some of the technical issues that you found when developing an age tech product, particularly when a startup is trying to help develop a product like this that's around user accessibility and usability for older adults?
Well, there are a few challenges right up front. When launching a tech startup, coming up with a concept that you feel will help society, whether it's through lived experience or through aspirational hope, is really only the beginning. The age tech and longevity space is both crowded and competitive, and so it operates at a lightning speed. Fortunately, being in the US, we have our long-term care insurance model and our long-term care model itself, whether it be independent living, assisted living, memory care, or skilled nursing. We have been one of the foundational models to which other countries really look towards in terms of their care. So that coming from that background, studying it, reading up on it profusely and seeing the ways in which it's obviously been impacted as well by the pandemic has really forced us to think about creating technology for this space differently. And I would say that as a tech startup, you have to think about units of scale and how the proof of the model is going to work not only at a small scale but also in a highly repeatable way. So when you think about it, the unit of scale should be a playbook that can address a certain scale, say falls within the home, which can then be repeated to successfully achieve linear or super linear growth. And that means looking at it as the home. All right, so you've got a certain age demographic that's living in a dwelling. In this case, we're looking at older adults, but there also are similar issues for young parents that have kids, and how are they going to protect and modify their home to meet the needs of their infants becoming toddlers. And so you start to think about those units of scale and how they could grow. For us, specifically, I would say that we've had to constantly pivot and repivot in terms of how we launch and think critically about our go-to market strategy. At its core, Renova Health has always been really driven by the built environment and how making certain changes along critical pathways and touch points within a home can go a long way towards fall reduction and better health outcomes. So we derived at the outset and geared our prototype around digital home safety analysis, the concept of looking at 3D AR captured spaces, linking them to problem areas between activities of daily living and desired outcomes, and then offering the accessible design and injury prevention solutions to meet the needs of the public. Our patent pending software has been really uniquely coded and constructed to pair spatial analysis with modified health solutions, hopefully toward improved health outcomes. But, this is always as I'm always learning in this and developing in that, is that it continues to grow. It's a continuous improvement process of learning, of unlearning, learning, and relearning along the way. So as a tech startup, we have to constantly stay ahead of the curve and continuously evolve with the rapid pace of technology. And especially when you're working in a field such as physical AI, where the horsepower of the built environment models, it could be, different beta releases. They're occurring at a breakneck pace, means that you literally cannot let up. You have to keep iterating, you have to keep pace, you have to remain driven, passionate, and unrelenting. And you also can't be deterred by rejection, because the age tech space is not nascent. I mean, we really were leading it prior to the pandemic. So there are a number of entities that have very strong footholds. Certainly AI is in a different space than it was in 2019, but you can't take applying to accelerators and perhaps you don't get in for whatever reason, and it could be that your product is not far enough along in its maturation. But that's all part of the growth and experience in being a tech startup. So I would say that's a challenge. We've also had to really look at product refinement from every angle as we go, and that means, all right, well, how are the fundamentals changing with certain SMEs that we work with? So we are incorporating both, we're looking at spatial health commerce, e-commerce. We designed our prototype so that that's already embedded within the back end of our code. And so as digital twins, the SDKs for digital twins are also improving and growing. And so how does that then apply to those shifts that we thought were static in terms of imports, and how is that going to affect digital outcomes? And then more fundamentally, I would say, regarding funding, research and development, and CapEx spending, one of the challenges with scaling a deep tech startup is the constant need for R&D and CapEx spending. So one way to overcome it is to design a business model where you can generate revenue as you go, and with each small step. But when building a comprehensive platform such as Renova Health, which offers a software product, an e-commerce lane, and an insight hub for aging in place learning, it's been hard at times and challenging, because it is such a competitive space, and therefore the pressure to deliver and outpace competition, really has been present from day one. So we've structured it so that we can use the revenue that we're starting to generate from our spatial commerce offerings. We're now an authorized reseller for a leader in the aging in place solution area, which is Step 2 Health. Yep. And we're now bringing on other product solutions, but we're at that point of having developed that revenue lane that can help carry us to continue as we grow. But it's it's certainly challenging, and you always have to titrate things as you go, because what you don't want is managing technical debt is a real hurdle when you're developing as a startup. Because
I think that's part of what we heard today. Exactly, is that there's so much happening technically speaking that it's moving so fast, and particularly in an age tech category like this, it's moving really fast. So again, congratulations on all your great work, and we're going to have you back on, and just tremendously articulate answers to some really complex questions. Thank you, Grayson, for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So next up, we have, don't forget to join us for the Innovators Summit in May 6, 7, 8, happening during New York City Health Innovation Week at the Microsoft Tech Center in Midtown Manhattan. If you want to get your free general fellowship at the lab, click on the link that is in the chat box and then enter the word innovation on the hitlab.org website. And you will be entered into an extraordinary raffle to join the HITLAB Breakthrough Fellowship and be a part of that community. And next up, we have Tim Liu to get us to the quarter hour. And Tim's going to talk a little bit about what's going on, kind of like what Matt Holt started out with banking and financing and digital health and life sciences. Tim, welcome to the program, and I'm going to hand the virtual stage over to you.
Thanks so much, Stan. Really appreciate it. And unfortunately, I don't have any cool avatars like Matt did, but I will do my best. Hey, everybody, Tim Liu from SVB. I run the life science team on the West Coast, really focused on seed and startup banking here, but wanted to share with you guys our healthcare report, which dropped about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and a lot of data here and a lot of cool things. Unfortunately, I'm coming at the end, so a lot of the things are going to be talked about, but would love to share the report with you guys. So I'll drop that in the chat at the end. Just wanted to put a little bit of a plug in as well. SVB has a number of reports that's available publicly. So every 6 months, we drop a investments and exits report talking about the state of healthcare, as well as state of the market reports for the broad market. We also have specific reports that go into fintech, climate tech, and tech. So if you guys need any of those reports, they're always available online. You can put that in the chat at the end. But wanted to focus on specifically on this last healthcare report, maybe give some insights that we had from SVB. The report's broken up generally into highlights, kind of the fundraising and investment broadly on what's going on, who the active investors are by segment. The segments that we break them up to are biopharm, so that's biotech, health tech, digital tech, tools and diagnostics, and lastly, we focus on medical device. We also have 2 spotlights that are within the report, and that's going to be this. On this one, it's going to be biopharma AI, which is obviously very hot, a little bit about de novo proteins, and then also a little focus on early stage, which we're calling seed and Series A. So I'm going to dive into some of the stuff and give some insights here. I hope it's valuable for everybody. Just starting off here, we're going to kind of go over the market highlights, very broadly. Big picture stuff, you can see $5.6 billion was invested in 2024 in biopharma AI. As everyone has noted in the, over the last couple talks, AI is hot. That sector specifically has grown 3x year over year. Another big highlight here is that 40% of all the deals in the last H2 of last year were in the seed rounds. So, maybe we're reloading, maybe we're getting ready for something new. And then as you can see, there's some specific highlights here in biopharm, health tech, tools and diagnostics, and device. I think this is a really neat slide. It goes over kind of the broad overview snapshot of what has happened over the last few years. It gathers all the data from those sectors. It really talks about, and you can kind of visually see where things are. Just some quick highlights here. You can see that, biopharm has kept relatively stable. It's really the hot market. I think Matt had talked about it earlier. But you can see this slow kind of increase going up as things are hopefully ramping up towards an upward cycle. We're hoping that this is the start of a cycle, and that we'll see things beginning to creep and climb as the year goes on. Wanted to just highlight this slide here. So this really talks a little bit about the biopharma, biotech, AI investment surge. Obviously everyone knows about the big deals. Zara, $1.1 billion. You can also see some other things here. I think there were some conversations maybe 2 talks ago about the efficiency of AI. I wanted to specifically focus here on biopharmaceutical AI. We had an interview with a postdoc fellow from the IPD, the Institute of Protein Design at UW. David Baker just won the Nobel Prize, and it was interesting to talk to him about, how is AI affecting your guys' lab? And the interesting thing was, scientists are always going to stay scientists and they're going to do their science things. But specifically, where is it going to help? It's really going to help with efficiency. And so you can see a quote here: what used to take 3 months now takes 3 days. And so that's an incredible efficiency. I mean, we're talking billions and billions of dollars, even on the level of people, headcount. You're taking somebody's time from 3 months to 3 days. And then lastly, just wanted to talk about, maybe the other side of it. AI promises to have the likelihood of success in these drug developments, but we've yet to see these drugs actually hit, humans and have a really big impact. So I think we're going to see some impacts on the AI drug discovery in a few years, yet to be seen, but lots of excitement there. Moving on to our next slide here, this really talks about the AI revolution in protein design. You can see on the right here, what are all the possible proteins that can ever exist, and how many exist in nature? I mean, there's an infinite possibility here for creating kind of new, novel de novo proteins that can really kind of change the landscape of what we're doing on the biopharm space. And then moving on to the seed stage, so this is another spotlight that we had. We're focusing here on the early stage of companies, and what you can see is that a couple things you can see here. Number one is you can see that Series A's are taking longer. So seed and Series A deals have longer development cycles. So you're seeing an increase in the number of median months that it's taking companies to get from seed to Series A. You're also seeing a kind of a nomenclature shift. What used to be a seed, what used to be a Series A is no longer kind of, that kind of all mixed up. And then, obviously we're just seeing a lot of seed deals coming in the pipeline, but smaller in revenue size. And lastly, exits. What does the light look like at the end of the tunnel? Interestingly, you can see here there was more M&A activity than IPO activity. So what does that mean? Perhaps there's an increase of the pipeline being refilled. I think somebody else brought up the idea that these companies, a lot of companies have patents that are expiring. So how are they going to refill their pipeline? And the last thing I wanted to point out here is if you look, there's a focus on oncology and kind of metabolic diseases, and where's the money going? And a lot of stuff also in CNS. I've seen a lot of stuff in neuro. And closing things out, just wanted to let everyone know there's other reports that we publish, not only healthcare, this is investments and exits, so broader. We also have one focused on health tech, kind of digital tech. We have one focused on AI, and we're going to drop a women's health report coming up, I think, in a month or two. And would love to connect with anybody. Please let me know, and I'll put the link for some of the reports in here at the end.
It's fantastic. Really appreciate it, Tim. And And just last couple of minutes here, did you have any perspectives and any insights on the JPM meeting 2025 that you'd want to share with folks?
Yeah, I think everyone was kind of, trying to understand what is the market going to be like, to use the analogy, are we out of the woods? Are things warming up? And it feels like things are going well. All signs are pointing, there. I don't think we're there yet. We're not around the corner. But there was a lot of excitement. I mean, obviously AI and women's health were kind of the hot topics. I think everyone's talked about that. But it was just really good to connect. It felt like a JPM that was reinvigorated. A lot of people out, a lot of meetings, a lot of good conversations, a lot of positivity.
Yeah, just incredible meeting. I agree with you about the kind of the sense making people were doing. What's going to happen this year? Or people are trying to consolidate portfolios. They're trying to find ways to make more with less, and they're trying to find ways to get partnerships and alliances done by the bundle. And in terms of 2025 and kind of the read that you just gave us, what are some of the, if there was like one sentence that you would say is going to define 2025, what would you say that would be?
I guess it's hard to say. I mean, and maybe I'm just speaking like everybody else, but AI is just table stakes now. Everyone has to have AI involved in their companies. How do you use it? And I heard some really interesting conversations about AI being kind of AI native or AI kind of built in. And when you take AI and you try to put it into your company, it's kind of clunky. So I'm interested to see too how some of these native AI companies that are hot get kind of pulled into these bigger, organizations and an M&A activity and what that's going to look like. I know that wasn't kind of one thing, but yeah. And lastly, I'll just say, I think the IPO and MMA activities in Q1 will really dictate what it's going to look like for the rest of the year. So really appreciate the time. And again, these reports are available to anybody, and hope everyone can use them. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and for the community, Tim's report is in the chat as well as his LinkedIn. Again, reach out, get in touch with him. Silicon Valley Bank, phenomenal partners, work with a lot of our companies and just provide immense value well beyond the simple M&A finance, banking finance, private banking, loans, other types of vehicles of investments, but just a great partner for digital health ecosystem. And life science companies. So do get in touch with Tim if you have any questions or needs. Thank you, Tim. Then we have one more time, everybody, your 10% off all memberships. Use the code January when you go to log in and get connected at a deeper level with all these great people that you're hearing from today. A lot more one-on small group meetings kind of thing, 5, 10, 15 people, and a lot more sharing expertise, that sort of off the record stuff that you get when you get those smaller groups. And Buzz Stewart, the CEO of MedCurio, is going to be the one taking us to the top of the hour and the last part of the segment. Hey, Buzz, how are you?
Good. How are you? Good to see you.
Doing great. Great to see you too. And for the audience, again, MedCurio is a company that's been HITLAB verified. We've done testing on it. They're revenue positive and offering tremendous value to the ecosystem. Buzz, if you give everyone like a 1-minute thumbnail on yourself and then talk a little bit about MedCurio.
Sure. So I've started my journey in healthcare as a research leader, first at Geisinger for 10 years and then at Sutter for 6 years, and made heroic efforts to try to automate with electronic health record data and scale that up in both systems, and finally decided that interoperability was a challenge. And so we launched MedCurio with a specific focus on enabling health systems to really use their data as they see fit. And so I was going to go through a kind of 10-minute overview of that history.
Perfect. Looking forward to it. I'll hand over the stage to you. Go ahead.
So in those early years, of course, the opportunity was to use data to figure out how bad things were or how well they were working, and to do what was a evolving tradition, which is to evaluate and then fix things and continue to work to improve. And as I stayed in healthcare, I got more and more interested in using those data to try to do work in real time, and moved to Sutter, where I thought I could find better technical talent, and I certainly did, but it turned out it didn't make a difference, that it was very difficult to use electronic health record data in real time. And As a sort of naive developer, I thought that sort of didn't make sense, since it seems like health systems should have been able to sort of do what they wanted with their data. But there were other things that were happening at the time, I think, that were clear indicators that we were facing a unavoidable sort of crush. And I could see it happening at Sutter in around 2010 to 2015, where there were two dominant forces that had been unfolding for decades. One was the cost of care increasing faster than inflation. That's been around forever, and a large part of that's due to labor costs. And then the other force, which is unavoidable, was the declining reimbursement. So Medicare and Medicaid were consuming more and more of the reimbursement space. And as many of you probably know, the reimbursements don't cover the cost of care. And the usual solution was, let's just get more patients who have commercial insurance. Well, that has sort of run its end, and we're now facing these dual pressures. And then in the last decade, there's also labor shortages of physicians and nurses, and that's projected to continue. So we're in this state now where we're facing unavoidable pressure. And the old methods of monitoring performance and improving PDSA, all of those labor demanding kinds of tasks that don't really create year-over-year value, that once you build it, you get sustainable ongoing value from it, are methods that are just simply not going to work as we go forward. Those methods, in my mind, are sort of more 20th century ideas and not really designed for the future. And really the only way forward is to automate, like other business sectors have. You have to be able to get a lot more work done when you face these kinds of pressures with less effort. And hence the reason why I think automation is a imperative. And we're in an era now where AI is really making making automation more capable and perhaps a lot more attractive. But not all automation is the same, as of course you might guess. There's a rapidly emerging solutions coming to market, and there are companies that are revenue positive in delivering those solutions. But many of them actually aren't in the space that really improve the bottom line for healthcare delivery. That's a kind of special space where the solutions have to do really hard work, which is they have to be able to enable workers and others to get a lot more done with a lot less effort. And the kinds of solutions that are in this chart on the left don't really deliver value in that way. They deliver value in other ways, but not for this core need to run the business of healthcare delivery and make it both more effective and much more efficient than it is today, and also build in ongoing gains year over year, that once you put something in play and you tune it, you're getting that gain on a go-forward basis. The good news, though, is that there's huge opportunities, I think, for using technology today to automate in the areas of care delivery where real revenue gains can be created for health systems. And I like to sort of bucket them into the four areas shown here in the larger circles. There's different ways of categorizing, and these aren't mutually exclusive because in many ways, when you think of healthcare, it's a business of many, many businesses, and they touch each other, and the hard work is they have to be integrated with each other, and they all use much of the same data. The one data that's common to all of these domains are electronic health record data. They all have a need for that. But the exciting opportunity is that we've been in a period where low-code technology has gotten better and better, and especially with the evolution of AI, in enabling us to build sophisticated solutions actually without a lot of technical talent. And what that really boils down to is an opportunity to really focus on coming up with really compelling ideas that create real value, and then designing things in a way that execute on the value. I think that the low-code revolution has really shifted the focus to folks who can invent things that really work and create real value. And I think that that's where there's a huge market to develop these kinds of solutions that systems have a crying need for. What's interesting to me is that if you look at the mechanics of how automation happens in delivering that kind of value, it turns out that the greatest value is in areas where there are complicated services that require the use of data by expensive labor. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's just about everything on the care delivery side. And if you're thinking that way, in general, you're right. But it's also, I think, useful to understand, so how do you bring these things together in a way where you can use low-code technology to design a workflow? And that would be this top part. And now virtually every player, and this is a Salesforce example, now have powerful and evolving AI engines that can serve as a supplemental workforce. And you design the steps in the process, data that need to be precisely integrated with that process, what the agent is enabled to do, and a whole flow that makes this kind of process work in a way that's seamless and well-informed. I call this intelligent automation because not only are you bringing data into a process precisely to show up to drive automation, but you're also summarizing data in ways that allows the agent to get things done in 1/4 the time without having to look through a patient's record and things of that sort. The content that's relevant to the context is summarized and presented there in a way that allows the agent to know more about the patient, know more about what their preferences are, and to more precisely meet their needs. And to get that done really fast. And I would say that the essential ingredient for this to work is that you have to be able to move electronic health record data in real time to drive this process. And it has to be precise in both the data that's required to show up and the way in which it shows up and the timing with which it shows up. So that kind of precise engineering is an essential ingredient to drive these processes. And even though we have low-code technologies and we've got these great platforms that are emerging and other ways of inventing solutions that are really quite compelling and on the face of it can really sort of automate and deliver value to health systems, we aren't really seeing a lot of automation in that area. We're seeing automation in other areas, but not in that area. And I would say for my years of experience at Sutter and seeing startups get going and then fall flat, the dominant barrier is constraints to the real-time use of electronic health record data. And I look back at the kind of tools that we had when I was at Sutter and at Geisinger. They haven't really changed that much. And they haven't really changed that much because nothing new has come to the market. These are what I would characterize as workarounds. Workarounds are an idea that we use a lot in medicine, we use a lot everywhere, we use a lot in our daily lives when we don't really have a tool that was designed to do the job. And so what you do is you cobble together what you think might work and you throw it at the market and you say, here, do what you can do. And then companies come in and they offer a bundle of services to try to help you make that workaround work. And I would tell you that it doesn't work very well. And if you've been in this business of trying to use these tools, it is a difficult journey to get through from your application and to get it into production and to keep it working. And there's a whole talk I could give on just the challenges that you face in trying to manage through this chaos, but it is very difficult because you can't really completely automate what you'd like to automate, so you dummy down ideas to the data that you can get. The deployment and uptake of the user base is slow. It's easy to lose trust because you can't adapt quickly, and the value that can be created is pretty limited. And so that workflow that I described to you before really can't happen where you can't plug data in a seamless way to enable the AI and the software itself to get work done so that the agent can get things done more effectively. And the challenge is not that it just takes a lot more time to get the work done, but intelligent automation is lost. And that means that most of the work is manual. So now somebody might be working from two screens, the agent's screen and the electronic health record. And there's no real intelligent guidance that comes to bear in a timely way that allows the agent to be more personalized in providing support to the patient. And all of that has a real impact on diminishing the outcomes, the costs, and things of that sort, and offloading work from the front lines. And in many ways, even with technologies like Salesforce, this is the current state that we're in terms of underutilizing those capabilities. In 2017, while I was at Sutter, after being there for 6 years, my CTO and I, we were talking about what next. And we both decided at the end of 2017 that we were wasting our time building front-end solutions. It was like, it was going to go nowhere. And in fact, I always thought if there was a market for startups that were trying to automate with electronic health record data, I would have shorted all of them and probably made a fortune. I would have had a lot more success there than elsewhere, but there isn't such a market. Anyhow, we decided that we needed to leave to reinvent interoperability, because if we didn't do that, or if somebody didn't do that, then the real revolution with automation to improve the care delivery process wouldn't happen. And so we invented this technology that we call Venue Access. I view it as the only technology that can power AI and automation to create value in a way that's certain and predictable. We designed it with that in mind. And it addresses what I would consider to be all of the critical needs in making technology work and fueling it precisely with data. And I'll talk more about this on Monday in a overview of automation in healthcare, but the technology really is, in my mind, what I would have been looking for when I was at Sutter. The thing that I find most exciting about this is when you realize you can move electronic health record data wherever you want and however you want, it really does open up your vision on what you think of doing. And I'd say that where we've gone is to begin to think about where are the critical needs for automation, what could we build, what's the value that it would generate. And we've been doing quite a bit of modeling in this space, and I'm impressed with the value creation opportunities by automating in this space. These are the kinds of things that healthcare delivery systems need to mitigate the unending pressures that they're facing. So I'll just close that with my original thought that the future of healthcare really does depend on automation, and automation in these critical areas of improving the delivery of care depend on real-time data. And I think that this is a technology that for the first time gives health systems the freedom to not be burdened by workarounds, and more importantly, gives them the full control to use their data as they see fit, which is the way the world should be. So I'll stop there. Stan, if you have any questions, or if the audience does, happy to answer them.
It's fantastic, Doug. Thank you so much. You and Doug Buzz have put together a phenomenal company, and congratulations on all the hard work and just a super impressive product. And again, for the audience, if you have any questions for Buzz and his team, again, you've got his LinkedIn in the chat. Do reach out to him directly and contact him. Thank you very much, Buzz. Great job.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
And that is the first symposium of 2025, everybody. We covered a lot of territory in 3 hours, but we've got a lot more to cover in February. So don't forget to sign up for the Digital Health Symposium in February, the evidence review that we do. And it's going to be all about digital heartbeats of health and revolutionizing digital health with AI. So looking forward to seeing everybody back on the last Thursday of February from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Thank you to an amazing HITLAB team for putting this together every month. Rachel, Yamita, Ansley, Raymond, Pallavi, Melissa, Jerry, Sammy, Nico, Rijo. Just great job, guys. And just wonderful. The best team in digital healthcare by far. And thank you to our wonderful sponsors, from the Merck Global Fund to Helix and Fox, IMC, Triple F, and certainly SVB and Versely. You guys are great. We appreciate your support so we can continue doing these programs. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Always good seeing you. The chat box is always amazing. And keep up the ideas, keep up the connections, and keep up the perspectives and insights. That's the only way we're going to make healthcare better through digital interventions. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of January. We'll see you in February. Bye-bye.